Good morning, everyone. Oh, hang on. I don't know why. So there we go. Okay, good. Morning, everyone. Technical difficulties. Welcome to the 9 a.m. public meeting of the BOCC. If you want to rise, we'll do the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have, before I have Commissioner Mortensen review the minutes for us, we do have it's a special day at 10. We're going to bring up Representative McIntyre and Senator Wilson and possibly Representative Orcutt and just have a conversation, which you're all invited to participate in. And so we'll get through business. And Commissioner Mortensen, would you like to review the minutes?
Good morning, everyone. As you might recall, we had a hiatus last week, so the minutes apply to the week before that. And I have reviewed the minutes and I move to approve those minutes.
Any questions? Corrections? I see no hands. I would we have a motion. I call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
I'll have to abstain. We got back last night.
Okay.
So I haven't had a chance to read.
I vote aye. That carries. Thank you. Consent agenda. We have a rundown through. Oh, before they get to the consent agenda, we have a proclamation request from the Wahkiakum Legal Aid. That's a pro bono week, October 22nd, 28th. I think I have a copy of it. I can. I brought a copy out. Would you gentlemen like me to read this and then decide what you want to do with it? Okay. In the matter of proclaiming the week of October 22nd to 28th, 2023 is Pro Bono Week. Whereas equal justice is a cornerstone of our democracy, and whereas many residents in Cowlitz and Wahkiakum counties do not have the resources to access the civil justice system, which leads to devastating impacts for low-income residents and weakens our democratic society as a whole. And whereas legal aid programs such as Cowlitz Wahkiakum Legal Aid offering no cost pro bono civil legal services can provide necessary supports for low-income residents of the community to navigate the civil justice system by providing access to legal professionals who can assist them with a variety of civil legal matters, including housing, family law, and elder law. And whereas generous and skilled local attorneys continue to provide hundreds of hours of pro bono services each year to a broad spectrum of the community, including low income and elderly residents, as well as the veteran, Latinx, Native American, and other underserved communities in our area. And whereas the American Bar Association has designated October 22nd to 28th, 2023 as National Pro Bono Week celebration to recognize the valuable pro bono contributions made by lawyers throughout the year, and to increase pro bono participation across the country by narrowing injustice. And whereas the Cowlitz Wahkiakum Legal Aid Board seeks to build support for pro bono work and commend the legal profession for upholding its professional responsibility to provide voluntary legal services so that all citizens may receive adequate and appropriate representation and protection in the legal system, regardless of their economic standing. And now, therefore, the Board of Commissioners of Cowlitz County City Council for City of Longview, I'm not sure that's in there, Washington, hereby proclaim October 22nd, 2023 Pro Bono Week in recognition and encouragement of the efforts of the local legal community to provide no-cost legal services to the most undeserved residents of Cowlitz and Wahkiakum counties. Comments, questions?
Historically, I have never approved of a resolution and always abstain until the last one, in which I voted against it because it did have something that violates some of my own principles. The reason I typically abstain is because these these proclamations are, like even in this case, it's an ex post facto proclamation. I don't know what it really accomplishes, except people who propose it feel I guess a sense of the sanctimonious accomplishment. In this particular case, I'm going to go against it because I'd like to scream at the top of my lungs that we are not a democracy. And yet one of the first whereases starts out at democracy. We are a republic, and there's tons of documentation going back to the Greeks as to the issues with the democracy. And that's why our country is a republic and our state itself is a republic. So I could go on there. It's got special interest groups in there, and I try very hard to observe a viewpoint that says if a special interest group is called out, there is something strange in there. We ought to be all for one and one for all, not in a divisive way. So anyhow, I just thought I'd let you know, Mr. Chairman, I'll be opposing this motion.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things that we said this morning at the beginning of our meeting in the Pledge of Allegiance was liberty and justice for all. In one small way, it seems to make sense that if we can encourage volunteer action on the part of lawyers who usually charge hundreds of dollars an hour for their advice, it is a good thing. We're obviously a pretty small cog in the wheel, but anytime we can ensure or increase or encourage volunteerism for promoting the goals of this country, I think that's a good thing. So I will make the motion to approve this proclamation.
Okay, go ahead.
Rare instance, political views of myself, mission boards.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
We gotta love technology. As you know, the political views of Commissioner Mortensen and myself are opposed. I was a Democrat and still am after 62 years now. According to the United States Army and the United States government, I'm now a senior citizen. Whoopee. But on that point, this proclamation by the attorneys of the state of Washington and Cowlitz County, I can put it into one word. It's a crock. And I can go on your consent agenda, but that's too far. But it was the founding father, Ben Franklin, after they finished the Constitution, he walked out of the Constitution Hall in Philadelphia and a citizen asked him, "What kind of government do we have?" And you're correct, Commissioner Mortensen, and you should know this, Commissioner Weber, because you were a civics teacher. The reply from Ben Franklin was, "It's a republic if we can keep it." And we haven't been doing a very good job, at least in my lifetime. And this resolution, and I agree with Commissioner Mortensen, we're opposing political views. He's correct.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add, if this resolution, this is a classic conflation of terms. If this resolution were about pro bono and volunteerism, I would not take the stand that I plan to take. So it's just got a bunch of other stuff. And when we review the contracts that we get, we always clean them up. We don't have an opportunity here to clean it up.
Any other comments? Seeing none, we have a motion on the floor. I would call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Opposed?
I oppose. Motion fails. Consent agenda. We have calls for hearings, two of them on September 19th. One is for comprehensive plan amendment, and it's scheduled for September 19th at 9:45. And then the other one is filing expenditure and revenue estimates, preliminary budgets. It's budget season, so we'll be busy with that. And that's scheduled for September 19th. 2023. Also, we have a notice of hearing for November 28th. 2023 to consider property taxes and assessments for 2024. And then a notice of hearing December 5th, 2023 for the 24-25 budget. So it's a busy few months coming up. If you like budget stuff, you're going to love it. Agreements, bids, awards. We have agreement, amendment to the personal service contract with Day Wireless Systems for radio services and maintenance. The total for 2023-24 is $27,453.59. It's an increase of just under $600. A solid waste management, local waste financial assistance agreement from the Department of Ecology. Total amount of that grant is $484,254. And that runs from July of 23 to June of 25. Then we have several 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are all agreements with real estate. 3 of them are for appraisal services that we may use from time to time. Public Works uses this maximum not to exceed 50,000 on those services. And then 2 of them are for acquisition services that we may need from time to time through Public Works. And that's not to exceed of 100,000. We have a completion letter to the Fire Systems West for the replacement fittings for the Cowlitz Event Center in the arena. That contract's been completed. Contract with Oracle Products and Related Services. Total contract, I think this is just a renewal, 3-year renewal, yeah, of what we currently do. 326,946.50. And then we get some federal funds for fire, and we've divided those up to 2 that went through 45-day public hearing. And so one is going to Cowlitz District Fire District 3 in the amount of $11,237, and the other to Fire District 6 in the amount of $7,000. Some board correspondence. It's budget season, so we got another from Diking District number 3, copy of their preliminary budget. The next 3, B, C, and D, are all through the Federal Energy Regulation Commission letters we routinely get from them, acknowledging work we're doing. And in vouchers in the amount of $2,740,726.92. Questions, comments on the consent agenda? Steve?
My comments concern item 3, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Probably the most honest public official in my lifetime in Cowlitz County was the late assessor, Colonel Ray Ryan. He's the only one I really respected in county government. Now you have all these appraisal services. Do we not have an elected assessor that is supposed to do this? why do we have to put out all this money for all these private appraisal services when we have an elected assessor?
I see Susan coming up. She probably better to answer that than I am.
Good morning, Susan Eugenius, County Engineer. So the appraisal services that we are requesting, when we receive federal money, we are required by our WashDOT procedures to have an appraiser, a review appraiser, and then acquisition services. These appraisers have to be on an approved list by WashDOT, and they don't include county appraisers. And they have to be an independent person from Public Works, which is why we set up these contracts.
Aren't the assessments in the county assessor's records for these appraisals?
So these are independent appraisers that are similar to what you do when you're buying a real estate reaction. These are private assessors and are not related to the assessor's office.
So I guess the question to change the law, you have two state representatives here today. You have a senator and a representative. So the question is, I guess the commissioners should ask them, can't we change the law and use appraisals that are already in the county records? That would be my suggestion.
I will ask that for you. Thank you, Susan. Any other questions, comments?
I'd just like to add on those contracts, those are not to exceed, and they're,
Right.
if one of them doesn't do any appraisals, they don't get any money. The idea of an independent appraisal is sort of like apple pie, it seems to me. There's, even if we personally try to sell our property, we never go off of the county assessors as Susan mentioned. I claim there's so many other problems. This one isn't a problem because we get an independent assessment. Let's go with the independent assessment.
Can I respond to that?
You're supposed to say no, Mr. Chairman.
Since
not
our
the city.
property taxes are based on the county assessor's appraisal, and realtors look at that when they sell a piece of property, you already have an independent appraisal because the assessor is independently elected. And at least the taxpayer has a say in that. These independent appraisal services, we don't have a say in that.
Yeah, there's a problem there. I, as a taxpayer, don't care what the county's assessment is when I'm going to sell my property. I want to get 10% above whatever the county assessor puts in. I'm going to get some justification for doing that. In other words, they're just two independent processes. And there was another issue, but it slipped my mind. My apologies.
Well, I've had to have independent appraisals in the states. And the people
Oh, I
were
remember.
from outside the county that did the independent appraisal, and they didn't know anything about the property here in Cowlitz County.
Well, you know, the appraisal for the county occurs on a timetable, and there are many assumptions built in. Those are not necessarily the same assumptions as what is driving the market at the moment. We've recently experienced significant changes in the market in a short amount of time. So I let the market do the driving, not some bureaucrat.
Well, you can also buy yourself an appraisal to get the appraisal you want. And if you don't believe me, go through the court records here in Cowlitz County.
Well, that's where I would add, we have,
It's called fraud.
yeah, we have a very clean county, and I cannot say enough good things about the Public Works Department or Susan Eugenius. They don't play around with trying to game the system. So you can take that however you'd like.
I can, and I can back mine up with county records.
Any other comments? See any hands? Pleasure of the board.
Oh, I was going to make a comment on item number 4. Is that is that something from you can talk to it? Excellent. I want to know whether it was a competitively bid thing. I know Day Wireless has been our supplier since I first took office. And I have the suspicion that we get the general good treatment of the government. You got deep pockets, you can pay for my overhead.
This represents actually a maintenance agreement with Day Wireless. It's an existing contract, and every year we do update it based off of price increases. This year, the increase was about $594, and it's over
Yeah,
7
but
departments.
cannot other people do a maintenance contract?
It's an existing contract, so we're currently in contract with them, and we have it in the contract to update this yearly. I don't know, but I can find out when the next contract is up for renewal. This is just representative of a price increase per
Okay.
contract.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Savannah, I did have a question also. This is a contract for repairing radios and I know that they've been very very helpful and effective for years. Does the price reflect the shift of 911 away from county ownership?
Yes, so 911 is not included in this maintenance contract. It's covered 6 divisions. We have jail, offender services, IT, juvenile, sheriff, and emergency management. And 911 is not included. And it is a lot lower than it has been in previous years when 911, of course, was included.
Only a $600 increase is
That's correct.
surprising. We've
Mhm.
heard a lot of other renewals that are a heck of a lot more. That's not even a % increase.
We had one division go down about $150. So it also represents that.
You hope we buy equipment prudently, and what we're doing is paying the Maytag repairman.
Yes.
So on item number 13, I thought the public would find it interesting, the amount, $11,237. And maybe my colleague Dennis can explain how that magic number comes about.
Well, it's actually connected with item 14. You'll notice that the description talks about response on federal agency land. Each year, the Congress passes a law that grants money in lieu of paying property taxes for various services. And however the formula turned out this year, Cowlitz County was awarded $18,237. And District 6 requested $7,000 and District 3 asked for a lot more, but we gave them the balance. So that's how we divided it up between those two. It's just a formula based on the number of acres that that the federal government owns inside Cowlitz County. It's not equal in any way, shape, or form to what they would have paid if they paid property taxes, however.
That was my next question for you. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mhm.
you ready for a motion?
I am.
I move that we approve today's consent agenda as presented.
Got a motion to approve. Questions, comments? Not seeing any. Quick scan. I don't see any hands. I would call for the vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Consent agenda passes. Thank you. Couple motion items, Public Works.
Morning, Susan Genus, County Engineer. So the first item we have before you is an amendment number 1 to the personal services agreement with RH2 Engineering for the design of the raw water reservoir. This is the second phase of this design. We did a phase 1 where we did a study to determine which project we were going to complete. And that was a $50,000 study. And out of that study, they recommended doing a raw water reservoir. And this is the cost to design that of $211,730 to be placed at a location near the existing plant for use during drought conditions.
And Susan, is this part of the funding program with dollars known as ARPA funds?
Yes, there is ARPA funding related to this. We are also working on getting some federal funding for this project.
Some
also.
additional federal funding?
Yes.
Because the community is predominantly senior citizens. Does that factor in at all, or?
It does a little, but it's the main factor of drought resiliency is a hot button right now because
Hot button? Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
as everybody knows, it's becoming more common in a lot of areas. And so there's more federal money being made available for drought projects, drought resiliency.
Thank you.
At least a couple of questions. Given that the cost of the design is 260,000, makes me ask the unfortunate question, how much is to complete the job with the actual build out?
It'll be about $2 million.
Okay, so the plans are usually on the order of 8 to 10%, 8 to 12%,
Yes,
Okay,
depending on the technical.
and that seems to be normal.
Yes.
Okay, and what's the timeline on this?
So the timeline is we're going to get the design and health approval. We're hoping this winter, and that will be out to bid before the end of 2024.
And so back to the question of the ARPA funds, who is paying the additional 2 million or so to complete the job?
So the ARPA funds are towards this project. We have about $1.5 million of ARPA.
How much?
1.5 million of ARPA towards this project. And the rest of the match is coming out of the water sewer fund in their reserves.
Excellent. Okay, and this is an example of a classic. You got to build something today for the use over the next umpteen years. And so somehow you got to fund it today, but you can recover some of the cost over the years.
Yes.
Good. Okay. And then the other one, RH2 Engineering, they're from up north someplace, are they not?
Tacoma.
Yeah. And I've heard good things about them.
We have enjoyed working with them so far. Yes.
Okay,
So
thank
we're
you.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
I find it kind of ridiculous and financially irresponsible for this thing to go from $50,000 to $261,730. I think this needs to go back to be rebid and investigated for gouging. I don't care that it's phase 2, 5, 10, or 7, but a $211,000 increase on an original contract is absurd. Commissioners, this needs to be going investigated for gouging and not approved.
I don't think you have the full
I
Full
got
picture?
the full, I got the full phasing of it. I understand it. But it was originally $50,000. Now it's $261,000. No, it needs to go out for rebid and an investigation for the whole project for gouging.
No, those are two individual contracts. Did you want to address that?
So we went through our consultant services selection process, and it was set up that we would do a phase 1, which would be the study. And then once the study was completed to determine what method we were going to use to provide services, we would then agree to a cost at that time. Because if you went for the plan your study and tried to guess what you would be building, we probably would have received an inflated price because they didn't know what they were building, so they were guessing, or I would have been back here with an amendment anyways, because, well, what we went with was more expensive than what they really thought at the beginning. So that is why we broke it up this way.
So essentially, the first 50K was to take a look at the universe of solutions and then try and come up with your best estimate or best assessment of which solution will be within the constraints of the area.
Yes.
And that's not free.
No,
Once you do that, you can issue out another contract for the design, and it doesn't have to be to the same individuals either, right?
correct. If we had decided to, we could have gone with a different firm.
So it's just a two-part thing, just stuck in one program.
For the benefit of us as kind of an overview of this water system. Sounds like we're spending $2.5 million of some people's money on this. This is a county water system, I presume. How many users are there and how much do they pay toward this service?
So Ron, those are absolutely excellent points to make. It's designed to serve the people in the Riderwood area, small in number. There's no way that their revenues could pay for an upgrade like this. One of the challenges we face is that when we have low rainfall and the level of that creek that they get the water out of disappears, we have problems supplying them with decent drinking water. So the county ends up operating a number of smaller water and sewer systems. The number of customers are always very small. The cost of improvement, we always have to go for grants because there's just not enough people on that. So this was an opportunity to take advantage of ARPA money, which was in part designed to go for infrastructure improvements for sewer and water, among other things. And we started that project 2 years ago, I think.
I believe so.
And started off with looking at what are the alternatives, continuing the status quo and hoping that August is a safe month for drinking water. I think one of the designs was to bring a pipeline down the highway from Castle Rock. I think that was one of the other alternatives. And that was even more expensive than what we finally came up with. Drilling a deeper well, I think, was another option, and that wasn't good. So that initial $50,000 study gave us a look at the different alternatives, and the recommendation of the engineers was this reservoir, save up the drinking water in the good weather, and just a better run. But there's no way that the people of Riderwood can generate the revenue to pay for all those kinds of improvements. So that's one of the things counties have to do in situations like that. Okay. Did I skip anything on that?
I don't believe so.
I can add the Riderwood system and about half a dozen others are all lumped into one pay pool, if you will. And among other things, I hope, and I suspect they did, we take a look at things holistically. So maybe the pipeline would have been more economical in the short run, but maybe the maintenance on it would be lower and the risk or liability would be lower. So maybe the cost of the project over 20 years would be less doing the pipeline. I don't think that was the case, but I'm just throwing out that I'm assuming that a full analysis was done that included operation.
Yes, they looked at operation and maintenance and the different alternatives. I believe we looked at 6 different alternatives. Another well in the Riderwood area, an alternative source. There were some log ponds on this creek that we looked at. The pipeline from Toledo, a pipeline from Castle Rock, sinking a new well in the out near West Side Highway because the Wyra where Riderwood is, so that's the water resource inventory area. That Wyra is closed for additional water rights, but the Cowlitz is open. But that would have included a well and then pumping it all the way over to Riderwood. Option was looked at, and then different scenarios of reservoirs on site were looked at.
Okay, thank you for your overview and our investment in our communities.
I'm not a civil engineer. I'm a forestry engineer, Oregon State University, but my classmate Vance Frazier was an ME class of 81 School of Engineering at Oregon State. He worked on a lot of fire systems for the Burgerville Corporation. And this is what he had to say about consulting engineers and contractors. They will draw out the contract until there is no money left. And I'm thinking of a pipeline that fell away on Pacific Way that belonged to Longview, and I believe there was a councilman or maybe mayor named Weber when that happened. It was 96 when we had the flood. We had a lot of land slippage, and city lost that whole pipeline from about 46 to Cold Creek. And then the city had to extend it up to the Wildwood development, which is the division between Raglan Road, what used to be Delameter, which is now Woodside, and Cold Creek. Well, you extended the water main 8-inch clear up Cold Creek to about the Fournier estate. And I was on Fire District 2 with Bunker Hill Station, and the Fournier house caught fire. If you remember a co-teacher in the Longview School District, Ken Jackson, he taught biology at Mark Morris. Well, we were on that fire and we got to the Fournier house. It was fully involved, and our tanker ran out. We only had a 1,500 gallon tanker. And we hooked up to Longview's fire hydrant at the end at the Fournier place, and it was dry. And I believe you were on the city council when they put the pump booster station at Wildwood. That was to extend up to that development to provide water. The whole point being here is consulting engineering firms, like the one that did the Washington Way Bridge, CH2M Hill, which was based in Corvallis, where Oregon State is. They followed the same policy. How did it take 3 years to span less than 100 feet when it only took less than 2 years to build the Rainier Bridge? So bearing in mind, watching consulting engineering firms and any other consulting engineer, you better keep your eye on them, or you'll have what we have in the military known as mission creep, only this is contract creep.
Thank you, Steve. Unfortunately, your facts are wrong. In most of the 90s, I was out off of the city council. So that if it was mid-90s, I didn't have anything to do with that.
That's
I remember the comment though, that you made. How many people
any
are supposed to pay for this pipeline?
any more on this Riderwood project?
Mr. Chairman, would you like a motion?
Would.
I move that we approve the amendment number 1 to the professional services agreement with RH2 Engineering, as has been discussed by staff.
Okay, any questions, comments? I see no hands. Call for the vote. Those in favor
Aye.
Aye.
also vote aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 17.
Number 17 is the bid award for the Cathlamet Road Slide Repair Project from milepost 0.55 to 0.57. This is a slide that occurred in January of 2022. We are receiving FHWA emergency relief money to do this project. We are stabilizing the road with the rock buttress. It is currently down to 1 lane. And this project will restore 2 lanes. We received 4 bids. The low bidder was Midway Underground LLC. We have reviewed their paperwork. They are a responsible bidder because there is federal highways money. We also went through the process with WashDOT to get their concurrence that they submitted all of their appropriate federal paperwork. So we are ready to go ahead and award this bid to get this contract moving so we can get the work done before the worst of the rains this winter.
Okay. Questions, comments?
I remember on our 6-year road plan, we had photographs and it was pretty precarious look at that. No guardrail, nothing to protect, just a drop off of the asphalt. So this is a route that provides emergency access around the slide area on Ocean Beach Highway. So it's pretty important to get that. You mentioned emergency relief. Is this 100% federal funded or are we paying 30 or 40%?
We're paying 13.5%. It's one of those weird formulas from the federal government.
Thank you.
A question, the bid we see here, or the total cost will be, is that based on 100%? On the design 100%, or is that a 50%? Are there more gotchas in here?
This is 100% design. So we do not anticipate like we did on the temporary bridge where we bid on a 50% design. This is 100% design.
Okay, thank you. And so in the 13.5% that we pay is the 400 or
It's 13.5% of the 400.
of the 400?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
This is just a question. I heard Cathlamet Road, is what locally known as Hay Mountain?
I'm not sure where A Mountain is. This comes off of Oak Point and Mill and goes up and then becomes Cathlamet.
Mill Creek, Spruce Creek, Oak Point Road, Robertson Road. So it is Hay Mountain.
If that's what you call A Mountain, yes.
Yeah. It connects in at Lokelman, right?
Pardon?
Lokelman,
I believe, yes.
and the repair is,
The buttress, putting a rock buttress to restore 2 lanes.
so you had landslip.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we award Midway Underground LLC the contract for repairing the Cathlamet Road slide as submitted by staff.
Okay, comments? Seeing none, would you have a motion? I'll call for the vote. Those in favor
Aye.
Aye.
also vote aye. Thank you. You got a group today, don't you?
I do. I have a bunch for y'all today.
18.
Next is change order number 1 with Quig Brothers for the Ostrander Road culvert replacement project. This is the change order to install the temporary bridge. And we discussed it early on in the project. And this is the formalized change order for $287,000. That included their design of the temporary bridge, placement of the temporary bridge, removal of the bridge, and relocation of some additional utilities.
Yeah, that you came to us and we agreed temporary bridge is better. We would prefer that over the other alternative. So any other questions on this?
So Quig Brothers has worked with us on a number of projects, right?
They finished the North Pacific Avenue half bridge and they installed the temporary bridge out on Tower Road. Prior to that, they did a landslide repair out on Rose Valley Road. Can't think of any other ones off the top of my head. We have worked with them numerous times in the past.
And they're out of Aberdeen.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
You probably told me, but I have forgotten, or it remains unclear. The 287K increase is because we now have 100% design, because the temporary bridge is already in place. has been
Yes,
for a
this
while.
is the temporary bridge. This is design, installation, and removal of that temporary bridge.
Oh, okay. I thought we had already paid for that, but we hadn't.
No, it was not in the original contract. We discussed it with you, and this
Got it.
was close, like within like $2,000 of what they originally said it was going to cost. So,
And as I recall, that is our bridge also.
no, this is their bridge.
This is their bridge, so
Yes.
that this includes a lease thing.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think the one on Tower Road is our bridge.
Yeah.
So we'll
Yeah.
Keep title to that.
Okay. Pleasure of the board.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve change order number 1 with Quig Brothers for the Ostrander Road culvert replacement, as has been discussed.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Questions? I see none, see no hands. I would call for a vote. Those in favor
Aye.
Aye.
also vote aye. Thank you. Number 19.
Number 19 is change order number 2 with Quig Brothers for the same Ostrander Road culvert replacement. This change order is a request from Beacon Hill Water and Sewer District. As part of this project, we are installing a temporary water line and then installing a new water line on the new structure. Their old water line was hanging on the old structure, so it needed to be replaced as part of this project. They requested an increase in the size of the temporary water line for the duration of the project. So this change order will increase the contract by $11,590.66. And that is all will be back charged to Beacon Hill. They have reviewed this and approved the amount.
So we'll put it in and Beacon Hill will pay us back for it.
Correct.
Questions, comments?
It seems strange that we would increase the size. That would seem something that a priori you would have done the computations and gotten it right.
That would seem to have been the case, but I think they misjudged the duration. So they thought, ooh, if it's going to be that long, maybe we need to upsize it. I'm not aware of why they decided to change it in the 13th hour.
Interesting. Did we do the computation or did?
No.
Thank you.
So this is an interesting connection because this is across the river from Beacon Hill. And this was one of those systems I think the county owned at one time and convinced Beacon Hill to take it over since they operate water systems. And I think they probably anticipate some growth.
So I'm not sure if it was the county or for a while, Cowlitz PUD also owned water lines. And I know what they owned got rolled into Beacon Hill. So I'm not 100% of the history of this one, whether it was a county or Cowlitz PUD that became a Beacon Hill line.
Okay. Pleasure of the board.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve change order number 2 to the contract with Quig Brothers, as has been discussed.
Okay. We have a motion.
Actually, I should note that the well, anyhow, yes, that's the motion.
Okay. See no hands, questions? Call for the vote. Those in favor
Aye.
Aye.
also vote aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Office of Financial Management.
Okay. We currently have a contract with Phoenix Protective Services Corporation.
And for the audience, you are?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Kathy Funk Baxter, Director of Finance Director. We currently have a contract with Phoenix Protective Services Corporation Solutions. And we're asking, that contract was for the last 12 months. It has expired. And we're asking to amend that contract and extend it until December 31st of this year, which is the next 4 months. And that's because our other contract with Hall of Justice and some various other county facilities, they expire December 31st. So this will get all of our contracts for security services all on the same timeline. So. And that is to extend our contract for the next 4 months with a total price of $38,734.
Yeah. And I think you kind of did that a little bit at our request to kind of line those up.
Yes, and to evaluate all of our services for the next contract, to include all of our locations in one
Yeah.
contract.
Okay. Any questions on this? Sir?
Phoenix Protective Services, this is the vehicle I see out front now parked in the administration parking lot, correct?
Yes.
And they also man that stool down there at the main entrance.
Yes.
And the Office of Financial Management is in this building, right? So Phoenix is already protecting the administration building, correct? So they have the contract and you're bringing all these contracts, so they end on December 31st, including the Hall of Justice, correct?
Correct.
Are they manning the security posts there as you walk into the lobby, the Hall of Justice?
Yes, they do.
Now, at the beginning of this year, you already had a contract with Phoenix for, I believe, $514,000. And that didn't include all these buildings at that time?
The original, before my time, but I believe.
Yeah, I
believe
don't
the
remember
original
the
number.
numbers
Seems a
exactly,
little
but
bit
yes,
high.
It was
This-
500,000 plus. I remember that much.
For how many years?
this is an add-on that we put on about a year ago now, I think.
Because when you approved the contract, it didn't include the Hall of Justice
That was already under contract.
of the 500,000 that you approved at the beginning of 2023,
Whatever that amount was.
514,000
No, that contract did include the Hall of Justice.
at that time.
Yes,
Now the add-on is,
just for this building for the next 4 months.
but you already approved it at the first of the year, $514,000.
This actual contract for this building was not in that contract. It was a separate contract.
Well, maybe I wasn't there in January then.
Yeah, it's two separate contracts. We took deputies. We were using deputy time in the Hall of Justice, and I think the commissioners went with Phoenix Security and put the deputies back on the road. And then we started having issues over here, mainly in the elections area. And so we brought a separate contract with Phoenix to cover this, is what I kind of recall. Okay, any other questions on this?
This will continue to have them make the rounds, HHS and the museum in particular.
Yes,
We're
it
having problems
includes
with.
the annex, this building, the museum, and the
Health and
Department
Human.
of Health.
Yeah,
And does he still open up the event center or the fairgrounds?
That one I don't know. I was trying to get a confirmation on
to,
that because it had in there a request to open the gate. Yes. But it wasn't specifically outlined in the contract.
any other questions, comments on this? I think we're just trying to line them, and then we'll review the whole package at the end of this year.
Yes,
Okay,
that's what I'm trying to accomplish.
yeah. Okay. Pleasure of the board.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve addendum number 8 to the personal services agreement to contract number 15-2019 with Phoenix Protective Services Corporation for amount of $38,734.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Looking for comments, hands. I see none. I would call for the vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Thank you, Kathy. That's the end of our agenda. I think we'll take in about 5 minutes, we'll have oh, good. I thought I missed something. We'll have Senator Wilson and Representative McIntyre. So how about a 5-minute recess and we'll get them set up here. Okay. Reconvenes. Commissioner Mortensen, we'll get Senator Wilson, we got you a spot.
You want up here?
Yep, yep, yeah, yeah. We had I asked a while back if we could, and Senator Wilson and Representative McIntyre are gracious enough to agree to come up and visit with us during one of our meetings and just, it's just kind of in my view, it's just kind of an open forum. We have some questions. It's a little bit selfish on my part. Since I've been in this seat, I've come to realize I really need to figure out a way. I have to be better at working with the state because so much of what happens to us comes down from the state. And so I'm looking for insight myself on what I need to do or how I address some of the agencies and whatnot. And so we just wanted to open this up and just have some questions and answers. And I think what I'll start with, I had an opportunity. I was at Woodland Chamber Golf event and I was playing with Representative Orcutt, and one of the comments he made, he talked about being on the committee they are and what that is like being in the minority party versus the majority party and what differences that would make. So I think I'll just open up and let Senator Wilson and Representative McIntyre tell you what they sit on and what would be the difference if they were actually in the majority and what kind of things they could do. Does that make sense? Okay.
Well, good morning, everybody, and good morning, commissioners, and to my seatmate, Representative McIntyre, of course. The difference in being a minority and majority is it's the simple math. Of course, we all know that somebody has to have that numerical, I guess, bigger number, and that's all it is. Yet there are some mechanical differences in the Senate, at least, when you're in the majority versus the minority. Of course, a lot of it deals with, well, who are you on status, say for committees? The majority party gets to have the chair. They, in fact, get the gavel. And so why the difference is being in the minority is we don't get to set the agenda per se. And in committees, it is the chair that has the all due encompassing ability to decide or influence if a bill is even going to be heard, which is usually the first step is to get something into committee. Well, before you get to the floor, well, before you vote, well, before you send it to the opposing house.
A quick question. Can the committee members overrule the chair ever?
Yes, there is a process, but it takes somewhat what's known as a supermajority of committee members present. It's incredibly rare. And then again, we have other rules. We have a rule book. I brought it with me. The Senate rule book is 357 pages of how things work. And so if you want to override the chair, there's a process for it. And even if you do, there's other rules. Say you want to get a bill heard and you want to get it heard right now. Even if you could carry that process, Commissioner Mortensen, you still have 7-day rules of notice and whatnot. So the bill wouldn't be heard that same day. But really in the difference of the majority is that they somewhat also have the ability to run the floor activities. The Senate floor leader, the majority party, of course, really has very much the ability to decide even if a bill's going to be heard, if it even gets to the floor after it's met all the other hurdles. So it really, in some ways, you could think of it like this, it makes the majority more in control of the process. But quite frankly, I want you to know as a minority member, to me, it just simply makes me work harder. It drives me into overdrive because I have to find other routes in order for something to maybe, get in the front stage for everybody to see in the process. But it is a significant difference. But that's the way it is and will be. There will be a deciding factor. Being in the minority means you also have to cover yourself more. There's less of us. So we have to represent on more committees. For example, I'm on 4 committees. The average is 2 or 3 for Senate members. So, you double down on the duty and the tides turn. It's not always one-way rule. Unfortunately, I do dream of potentially getting a gavel someday, Mr. President. Thank you.
We would love to have you have a gavel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. My name's Representative Joel McIntyre. Of course, I'm state representative for the 19th Legislative District, which is the western half of Cowlitz, the western third of Lewis, a little bit of Thurston, all of Pacific, all of Wahkiakum, and the southern third of Grays Harbor County. So if you can picture that in your mind, it's the whole southwest corner of the state. And so it's 6 counties, either in whole or in part. And so there's a lot of county commissioners' names I have to know, and mayors and things of that nature. And where I've been most effective, I think, as a legislator is in having good communication lines with local leadership to be able to pass on the word of what you want. I have the pleasure of serving on 3 committees. Education K-12, dealing with our kids' school and education. Post-secondary education and training, so things like if you want to be a lawyer, a nurse, a dentist, the kinds of trainings that after K-12 or college universities. So education and training of that nature, and capital budget, the budget that builds structures around your district that people like and enjoy. Being in the minority means you have to count your wins a little bit differently. We're often not graded by how successful we are by how many bills we pass, but by how many bills we're able to stop. In Great Britain and other countries, the minority party is always called the opposition. Sounds kind of bad, kind of adversarial. Like, why would you be called the opposition? Well, it's in an adversarial legislature, when someone proposes a bill and they're in the majority, it is expected that the minority party will comb through that, looking for any defect, any weakness, anything at all. And that is one way in which our system is able to be stable and have some kind of accountability, is that if there's going to be a flaw in a bill, I'm going to find it. That's the minority's duty, is to find those flaws, those errors, and bring it to light and either amend them out or find a way to bring the bill down so that it doesn't go forward. Every year, Senator Wilson, help me, was it 950 bills? Was that about right, that were put in last year? It was something, it was close to 1,000 articles of legislation were put forth. I assure you, not near 1,000 passed. And a lot of that just because there's not enough time to deal with that amount. But many of them didn't get through because of the opposition of the minority party and how we work. And part of that strategy for me was my first 2 years of being in the legislature was not saying anything. I kept my mouth closed almost completely. I spoke just a few times. And that's, people are surprised. They're like, wow, I can't imagine you not speaking. But what I was doing is I was reading the poker table. I was looking at the people in the room who are the chairs, the vice chairs, the movers and shakers of the Capitol. I was learning their names. I was learning where they come from. I was learning their personality types, their strengths, their weaknesses. And then second session in, I was free to talk because I knew how I could work with people to get a positive result and get the best deal that I could for you folks. So I guess I'm still considered kind of new in that I'm still in my second session. But I have thoroughly enjoyed being able to go to Olympia in this last session, being that the first one was all digital. They kicked us out and fenced up the place so no one could go in. But in this last session, they allowed us to come back face to face. Is a much better way to do business. It's the way that I enjoy. And I just enjoyed doing good work, but I'm sure you have concerns and questions, so I'll turn it back to the chair.
I'll start off with a question, a couple, and of course, my colleagues can kick in at any time, and of course, the audience can too. What do you guys see that worries you that might be coming up there, and how can we best be involved as a Board of Commissioners to help with that?
I don't know if it's worried, but you always have to look in the future, like what's coming next. Or what are we going to deal with next? And everything to me must be, I guess, in a perspective of prioritization. And it is ironic. I do get concerned at times because of our priority. Government's purpose, its place. What are we here for? And we know we have a number of issues that are, they're priorities to our district, like the economy, housing, addiction. We have a number of issues. And what worries me, Mr. President, is when we start getting what I call sideways. When we don't focus on going after the Captain Obvious type problems. For example, housing. Everybody knows we have a housing issues and crisis. I will accept that word. But when we look at things like that topic, the barrier to it, the problem is us as in government. That's why the solutions don't come as quick as I'd like them. So to me, something like that would be a priority. But when we start to move away from those topics and passing good legislation, we're legislators. We're not rulers. And we start arguing over police pursuits and Blake decisions. It just takes all of that time away, that limited time, because we're a part-time legislature. So we only get so much time to be in session to pass legislation. So it's really about time management. So I'm always worried about, well, where are we going to come next year? And a lot of the focus has been somewhat social. Every theme, the first 3 years, a lot of it deals with individual, say, needs. And to me, I get a little confused because when we get into like identity politics, I want to identify as a well-balanced constitutional republic. I don't want to get too much into the weeds, and I certainly don't want our lanes as Olympia to overrule and then to get into, say, the county's authority. A lot of this is how much more is the state going to really encompass our everyday lives with, say, statewide mandates versus always respecting local control, local voices, because Representative McIntyre will always bring up that we're here to serve. We work for you. And I'm always going to be worried, Mr. President, especially that Olympia seems to want to grow in its reach, which we simply call overreach. So regardless of that, it's more of the theme than the specific.
One of the things that you will see coming forward more than it has is draconian environmental policies. If you think it's bad now, just hang on. It's about to get worse. We're right now tied with California for the highest gas prices in the nation, and those prices will go up. They will go up because if I wanted to control your life, and I got out my notepad and started thinking, how could I control everybody's lives? The best way I could do it is through environmental policy, because no matter what behavior you exhibit that I want to disrupt or have some say over, I can link it to something environmental. And so there's nothing you do in this life that doesn't have some kind of primary, secondary, or tertiary effect, and therefore it is the state's job to manage you in your life. So as we have given way to environmentalism, as we all enjoy the environment, and so we all know there's a place for environmentalism to an extent, the balance is so far out of whack. It has literally controlled every single debate we have. Almost isn't a single subject that comes up in which there isn't a outspoken portion of the legislature that says, but the environment, we have to pass this, even though it has nothing to do with the environment at all. And so to blame you people, to blame Washington citizens for the problems of the world, I find most reprehensible. To say that you're going to be punished because of what other countries may be doing. They're putting their plastics in the ocean. They're not cleaning their chimneys as they pump a bunch of carbon into the air. And then we say, well, that's such a shame. Looks like your gas just went up 50 more cents. Congratulations. So the Capitol has made it a point that as the world becomes filthier, you are going to make up for their errors by being all the more cleaner, and it's going to cost you. And so we have let this go so far down the road. It's going to be very difficult to reel this back in to folks that have been, if you went to school anytime I did, then on, if you've been hearing this, that we got to do something, we've only got 8 more years before the world is beyond that. And then 8 years comes and they say, just 3 more years and then we're done. And it just keeps getting reeled out to scare people into this kind of compliance.
You're talking about the COVID?
Yeah, well, same thing. The pseudosciences that were taught and told to comply with. After we realize that they were wrong, it's often too late. We've given up too much of our freedoms. And so that's what I fear is, a return to draconian COVID policies, again, where we're told that if you just will comply for a little bit, everything will work out. And they press on your good graces that it's just a small thing. If you'll just do this little thing, the world will be a better place. And then if you'll just do that, and then you get to the point where you didn't think you'd be, where it's like, take the shot or get fired. And we're like, I didn't see this coming. I thought it was just, stay indoors for a couple weeks and let it mellow out. No. So you give an inch, they take a mile, and that's how it is with environmental policy. And right now we're in that upper reaches of a mile already. So
one of the things that I wanted to make sure we get across this morning is a thank you to both of you. You've both told us already that part of your job, an important part of your job, is to get to know the other legislators, both Republicans and people on the other side, because we are a small piece of Washington State. What is important to us is kind of irrelevant to a lot of other people. So to get our issues protected, you have to do the kind of relationship building and get to know them. And we have at least 3 examples. They're going to be kind of small potatoes, but when you think about it, it's fundamental to our way of life. One is the fact that every year the budget is passed and there is a provision of money for Cowlitz County to purchase places to place dredge spoils when the decision is made to dredge some more of the Mount St. Helens silt. That has to be put someplace. And that every year it's been institutionalized because our legislators have made those kind of connections. Nobody else in Washington State cares a whole lot except us here in Southwest Washington, because it directly can affect us. The second example also deals with the aftermath of Mount St. Helens. There is a collaborative in which 20 different government agencies are meeting on a regular basis to align ourselves with sediment management, with environmental protection where that's appropriate, with economic resilience to restore tourism, and just the thought of 20 different government agencies collaborating is enormous. The state legislature has come through with support, with funding, so that this collaboration can continue to go forward. That's important for us. The rest of the state really doesn't care. So their talents continues to help that collaborative going forward. The last one has to do with something that we've mentioned a few times, and that's called Growth Management Act, the GMA. There is a section of the GMA law, state law for years, that provides for counties planning apparatus to be much more draconian than we have in Cowlitz County. And that is because several years ago, a previous local legislator was able to get put into the law that the most strict regulations under GMA don't apply to counties who grow less than 17% per census. So that's a 1.7% growth rate a year. And we've been able to escape these more draconian fiats that Councilmember Commissioner Representative McIntyre was talking about, because our growth has only been 1.4%. And again, little things that make a huge difference to Cowlitz County is possible because we have legislators who understand that you got to work with everybody and try to put together what's important for Cowlitz County first, and the other issues will fall into play. So thank you. They do a good job of listening and working. Their names are on bills, supporting bills, and they understand how that process works. So again, thank you.
Glad to have the opportunity, just in case it gets confusing to people. I have great esteem for Joel McIntyre and Jeff Wilson. I count on them to help us figure out what we're going to do about an insane system. Because what we have is a broken system. All the platitudes aside, all the history lessons don't really address the problem that as days go by, things get worse and worse. Representative McIntyre mentioned COVID just a couple of weeks and so forth. And yeah, we went through that litany. What government seems to fail is understanding that you cannot fix everything. In fact, it's almost invariable that the cure is worse than the disease. So I would rather that instead of having fielded 950 proposals, if you will, that they had changed those as opposed to new. It's 950 proposals to eliminate 1,500 other things that had occurred in the past. We're in a lot of trouble because we get involved with emotional issues. Commissioner Weber mentioned the collaborative. And that reminds me of how the big boys get together in a room and they shake each other's hand. We pat each other on the back. What really counts is what comes out of that. A collaborative of 3 agencies is monumental enough. Of 20 agencies, don't hold your breath because you're going to die before anything useful comes out of that. And so anyhow, I could go on. I really would like to yield my time to the chairman, who I would ask him to yield it to the public, because we can talk to these guys anytime.
Yeah, come on up. Just make sure the little bright green light is on so we can
Yep.
hear.
I can't believe how many good conservative friends I have in this room. Arn is one of the men that I consider my close personal friend. Dennis Weber is one of the men that I consider my close personal friend. And then there's this young fellow up here. Oh, don't be modest, Jeff. And Jeff and I met at the at the labor picnic yesterday. And I says, Jeff, why are you here? And he looked at me like, well, are you some kind of dum-dum? And so he introduced me to his mother, who is 87. It was a real privilege to meet her. I want to ask you a general question. How is the biennium budget for the next period? And are we getting our fair share of capital budget, capital projects in Cowlitz County?
Mr. Dryer, it's good to see you. It's good to see you yesterday. How we do the biennium budget or with the health of it, if I were to give it a score right now, I would say we're in very good health. Revenue projections are remaining, I don't want to use the word rewarding. There's a lot of revenue available. And although there's some caution that revenue growth may slow down, but last year we approved a $70 billion operating budget. And we have these huge budgets because the revenue continues to come in. Really, there's some debate as to why we have so much revenue and so much money coming in. There's some discussion, Richard, on the Climate Commitment Act and like the carbon auctions, which has yielded close to $1 billion now in money to come into the state to spend. I caution people that the good times of lots of money can never last forever. So what we do to get money and capital money specifically when times are good, and they have been, is that in the Senate, we're allocated usually somewhat of a budget item. There's usually a number that's told to a senator, this is what you may be able to spend on capital projects throughout your district. And as you know, it's a huge district. It's all the way to McCleary, to Aberdeen. It's a very enormous size, a lot of people to please in between. But then on top of that, with budget writing, we're able to get more funds. And we were very successful in the closest area here in Kelso, for example. We got a roof that's coming in on the train station. These are very important local capital projects. I was thrilled with the amount of funding that the 19th district got. I wish it's more, and that's what we constantly lobby for, because we want it to be fair. We don't want to have another district end up getting more than us. And at that time, there's where we have to jump up and down and say, we need to share the economic success or availability to everybody. But with us, I have to do it on a 6-county-wide basis. It's not always about Cowlitz County. We've got PL, for example, a little city. We had to get them a water line. That's $700,000. But I'm here to tell you that things will continue to be what I say healthy budgets. The problem is what are we going to spend it on? That's usually the biggest debate. Where's your priority? Do you want electric ferries, for example? Do you want 2 electric ferries that cost $1 billion? Or could you take that $1 billion? How much housing could you create? And so what you do is, that's probably the biggest challenge is when you get X amount of dollars, how are you going to spend it? And I'm pleased that we've been successful for the 19th on capital projects. I'd like to see more money come in though. So I always want more, Richard.
So just quick question on that, Jeff, you don't want to raise taxes. You don't want to bring more money in. True? That's not what you meant to say.
No, I would not say that. We do not need to tax at this time and place, because the time and place is, come on, friends and neighbors, we're just healing and reeling in from a pandemic. That's a big enough hardship. And then on top of that, we have 40-year high inflationary rates. So your dollar, Ron, your dollar, it's not worth $1 anymore. It's worth 70 cents. We're already under duress of how we eke by, a lot of us, our survival economically in the state. Now the state's doing great. So not only do I look at taxes or fee increases and scour at those, because I believe in the times of good and plenty, why aren't we looking back and relieving the pressures like on seniors, exemptions for property tax? Why do seniors have this $40,000 combined income and then after that you're rich? That's not what it's about. So what I'm trying to say is we need to use our money wisely. And if it means investing back into ourselves through like property tax relief, especially for seniors, then that's what I argue for. I caution people because the forecast can't stay good forever, but we have to be very careful on our spending habits. So the spending habits, to me, I don't concur with. I voted against, for example, the transportation budget at the Senate. We have operating capital and transportation budget. And why I voted against it this year is it because it had another large amount of money to study for the 4th time taking out dams on the lower Snake River. And there were some good things in the package, but sooner or later we have to take a stand and let's move forward rather than beat us over the head with tearing out the dams. Why aren't we transitioning our power instead of you mandating us? So I'd like to see some relief back on how much generous the revenue is right now.
Thank you.
And I agree with Senator Wilson. The state is doing very well in getting your money.
So that's the positive end. It's coming in. The negative end, it's all coming out of our pockets one way or another. And so we don't get the choice to spend it. You guys get the choice to spend it for us. And hopefully we can help you make those decisions. So an example on that right now is the 50 cent a gallon Inslee steel in gasoline tax that we're all paying. And I just got back from Eastern Washington and it has hit across the state. Everybody is spending that extra 50 cents or more per gallon for everything they put into their automobile. So that's not a solution to anything. That's just putting more money into some slush fund that we don't get a choice on how it's spent. So anyway, the answer is not more money. The answer is deciding on what the real charter is of the state and federal governments and county governments and fulfilling that charter. Thank you.
Ron, just real quick on that. The gas prices are up. The problem with the gas prices is it's become a political blame game. A lot of people in government will say it's the oil companies, the pipeline, it's their fault. No, it's not. In 2021, the Senate and the House, we passed the Climate Commitment Act, and that really evolved forward to later on where Ecology would set up this scheme to sell carbon credits to just certain polluters. And that income would be a revenue stream for the state of Washington. And it was ironic because only petroleum were targeted to raise that money, that tax, that fee. But we didn't do airlines. You know, the big things that fly in the sky that have a bigger carbon footprint than anything in this state, they were exempt. And supposedly our farmers, the agricultural communities, and Westport, Washington, the #1 leading fish landing in the state comes in our district. Westport, little teeny Westport brings in fish. They were supposed to be exempt, the fuel that went into those boats, but they weren't. They're still being taxed. So we've raised a lot of money and we have not any data yet, Ron. We have not reduced 1 metric ton of carbon as a result of the Climate Commitment Act's carbon auction. And these carbon auctions are the reason why your gas price is the way it is. Whether we're #2 or #1 or 3, it doesn't matter. I was in Idaho and just got back 2 days ago. It was $4.09 per gallon. The difference is us. So again, although we're in the minority, the Climate Commitment Act is currently in to stay. So what do we do with this money? I'll offer up right now with these $1 billion. Anybody in this room ever go to Oregon from Cowlitz County? You'll be crossing a 94-year-old bridge called the Lewis and Clark Bridge. This is, I could be very supportive of this if I could get a check to say, we're going to get that bridge fixed. So again, now that we have the money, it's called, what are we going to spend it on? Spend wisely.
Oh, just my thoughts on that. Whenever I look at the policies of the state and how the state runs, I try to reduce it down to the behavior of a single individual. And if you were to have a, let's say a relative, they have a job, they make money, they spend money, and they could show you their budget and it would look just like a state budget, money in, money out. But you can tell a lot about the behavior of somebody based on what they're purchasing and what their outlook is for the future. If you had a relative who was getting promoted like clockwork every year, they were getting 10% more at their job. And so now they're making $150,000 a year, but then they buy a $1.3 million yacht. And you say, what are you doing? And they say, well, I've looked at my chart and at this rate, you know, I'll be able to pay the yacht off in 10 years. As if they are going to continue to get promoted every year, as if they're always going to count on that 10% increase. And it's not a wise way to live. It's not a wise way to do business. And one of the problems with our state is that we have that mindset. It's like, no, we're going to continue to grow. And so we're not taking this extra money that we have and putting it into a rainy day fund for disasters. We're not putting it into infrastructure and for things of investment. We're putting it into liabilities. We're putting it into things that we're making Frankenstein monsters that cost tremendous amounts of money. And they say, but that's okay because see the chart, see the graph, how it goes up. We're going to be able to pay for that in the future as if they're guaranteed to get that. And that's the danger. And so if I had a relative who was living that kind of life, I'd say, you dope. It's not always going to be like that. And so I say the same thing about our state sometimes.
I appreciate your minority comments, Jeff, that you have to work 3 times as hard to make up the difference. I think you guys are very much aware that we have a lot of volunteers out here trying to help you get to the majority. However, my biggest fear is that the Republicans do get to be a majority, because I'm not sure in my lifetime I've ever seen Republicans in the majority actually doing anything successful other than shooting themselves in the foot, and it goes right back the other way. So how do we help, if we help you get to a majority, how do we know you're just not going to blow it the way Republicans always seem to do?
Being a Republican doesn't make someone any good or better than anyone else just because they have a letter behind their name. Anyone can put a sticker on their shirt and say, I'm a Republican. It doesn't make them a good person. It doesn't make them a good legislator. I know plenty of Republicans who are just flat losers, and I have to work with them. But that's, you know, I don't get to, their constituents put them in there. It wasn't my call. It wasn't my choice. They said whatever they needed to say to their people. They put them in, and that's how our system works. All we can do is here locally, support the people that we think would do a good job. It's all in our imaginations that, why, man, if I just had the power, if I had the, you know, if I was the Lord of the universe, I'd do things right for you. I would. You don't know until you get there. You don't know until someone is put in a position of authority and power, how they're really going to act and how they're actually going to govern. And I at least have seen plenty of disappointments, people that I thought were golden all the way through. And then when they got in, they became disappointments. I've seen other people where I didn't think much of them. And when they got in, they impressed me with what they were able to do. And so there's no partisan title that immunes somebody, or even on the other side, I've met Democrats, which are completely reasonable people and are good people and people that I can work with and talk to and find common ground. It's possible. I've seen it. May disagree on a few things, but they bear that the blue sticker and I have the red sticker, and so we're supposed to fight in front of the cameras and make a big spectacle in front of everyone. But really, if you really want to get something done and you really want to get what you want, it is about having some kind of common ground or relationship. I can't guarantee you that if we were in the majority that we would make all your wildest dreams come true. Because I'm one member of a 98 member body. So I'm not at the helm. but I'm a member of that body. And so I would, we've talked before, and I would always try and keep my office open to you and the other constituents that that have reached out to me in the past. I'd try not to do anything different. I try to be the same person that I am right now, and not kick up my feet and say, now that we're in the majority, we can goof off and blow it. I try not to let that happen.
Well, that's a good job of describing human nature. So we all know that exists, but for some reason, call them whatever you want, Republicans, conservatives, they seem to have a hard time being cohesive and remaining on the same team. So that to me is the biggest risk. So if you understand that, how do we avoid that if we get to the point to where we have a majority?
You know, Larry, I gotta tell you, for me, the challenges of what I do for the district, my biggest attitude is remain more positive than not. I have to. I'm always going to choose the path that, yeah, there's some bad things going on, but I'm here to make a difference going forward. I don't tread a whole lot in the past. There's 150 some thousand people that I've got to represent their voice on the Senate side in Olympia, regardless of partisanship, regardless of even voter status. It gets to be ironic because, you know, we get calls at the office, and I may take a call from a person saying, I need you to do this. I don't like this about your government. Oh, cool. We have a conversation, and well, I haven't even, if I find out that they haven't even voted. And yet I still will listen to that voice and take that message forward. Believe me, the lecturer in me would like to say, look, why don't you do your civic duty? Why don't you vote? But you listen to any and all, and Larry, we got to move forward. The majority is what it's going to be. But for me, majority start from the center of the hub of the wheel. My universe revolves around the 19th district, and then it moves out to everybody else. So my commitment to you, sir, is I will listen, continue to, and do the bidding of the district first. That's my prejudice. Sure, I'm concerned about statewide, but the first step I take every day when I get into my legislative duties is for us first, this district first. And, you know, I make it a point for us to get along because the rule book I mentioned earlier, here it is. It's just the small version. That's what drives the Senate. Very much a process, regardless of who's in the majority. But Larry, we'll always listen to you.
Thank you.
Talking about when Larry was getting you guys the majority, I have a couple concerns. One is if we get you guys the majority in both houses, when is the common sense going to come into play for you guys to take a step back, follow not only the state constitution laws, but say enough of these passing laws that hurt the law-abiding citizens and let the criminals get away with whatever. My other concern is that last week I walked a 4-block area with my dog. I got one of those little things and picked up almost 1,300 cigarette butts. And you talk about environmentalists, you talk about this and that. When is it going to come to a point where if you get the majority, say enough of this? I mean, I know there are cigarette smokers and they're going to that, but it needs to be banned. It needs to be said, if you're going to, you can't import them, you can't distribute them, you can't sell them because those things are in the environment and they don't break down. And the second thing is, I'm not a tree hugger. I'm just a concerned person as I get older, that when I was in my business class, there was a gentleman that did a educational or teaching video of his company that makes environmentally friendly plastics. He sat there and took a 6-pack ring, took one of the rings and ate it because it was a biodegradable plastic. When are we going to start saying enough to these big corporations like Pepsi and Coke and whatever and say, hey, if you want to do business in the state of Washington, you have to use these biodegradable plastics because it's not only killing the fish we eat, the birds we shoot, hunt when it's hunting season. But there are 7 main island size garbage islands in the oceans, go from top to bottom in garbage with plastic and all that other stuff. And when are we gonna say enough? And start do that and following the constitutional laws that give us certain rights instead of having the radicalist neo-Nazi side and a radicalist neo-communist side tell us that we can't have our freedoms that are guaranteed under both the United States Constitution and the Washington State Constitution. I don't know when the last time is that you read the preamble to the state constitution. It says, to be the state constitution, we will follow the laws of the land under the founders. And they don't, you guys are not so much fighting, but sitting there saying, stop taking the emotional part of it out. I know there are mass shootings and we're all sick of hearing it, and we're all sick of seeing it. But you guys here in our state and our county are going after the wrong people. You're going after the legal gun owners that are responsible. And instead of saying to the traveling gun shows and doing more to say that if you give a minor or a person a gun, let them steal a gun, let them purchase a gun that has not had a more depth investigation of their mental stability, get them, or these people that make bump stops that make these that are now outlawed, turning them into fully automatic weapons. When are we going to stop, take a step back and stop doing stuff like that and say enough is enough and restore our First Amendment constitutional rights, both state and federal, our Second Amendment rights, federal, and line 20, section 24 that goes along with that says we have the right to do this. We have the right to say, if you're a son of a bitch, you're a son of a bitch without worrying about getting A, beat up, C, shot, sued. Because under these first 2 amendments that are being stomped on statewide, nationwide, it's a shame. If we get you the majority, you need to say enough and reverse I-1240, I-1163, and I don't remember what the magazine law is, and write responsible laws holding people that do not allow or not supposed to or purchase to give somebody that doesn't have a gun and say, look, if you're going to do this and you do this stupid shit, excuse my French, ladies, is to go to jail, go directly to jail. You do not deserve a trial. You do not deserve civil liberties. And you have to be able to sit on death row because it's ridiculous that cops in other parts of the country, 7 of them, 8 of them, 9 of them beat up killed a kid, 25-year-old father that wasn't doing anything wrong, or pulling guns on people with cars that they just bought and they have stickers in the window saying you don't have it. We need to stop punishing law-abiding citizens, God-fearing or not, and go after the people that are doing this stuff with no, gee, you have civil liberties. Somebody shoots somebody to death on a mass shooting or even a shooting or a stabbing or whatever, drug dealing, does not deserve civil liberties. And they need to go to jail, directly to jail and death row, period.
You're covering a lot of territory. Why
I
don't we
understand
give him
that.
a chance to respond here?
Yeah, and I'll be brief on this. You did cover. a lot of
Before
territory.
you do that, may I ask the chairman for permission to address?
Yeah.
I try and take a look at things at a very high level. And if I were these 2 gentlemen listening to you, I'd be confused as all hell. On the one hand, you want the Constitution, but on the other hand, you want to ban this, you want to ban that. you want to
ban
tell us
this,
how
I want to
live,
say,
You want to ban cigarettes?
yeah, how
Okay, no,
come they're
no,
not going after
this is not
cigarettes?
a
Keep on
discussion
drinking
with
people.
This is not a discussion with you, just to say, in your shoes, I'd be terribly confused. So I just thought I'd lend that statement before you proceed, because this is classic of the citizens want what they want. They demand what they want. They cite the Constitution for what they don't want, but do not accept the consequence of the theory or the liberty that the Constitution offers you. Thank you.
And thank you, Commissioner Mortensen. And I'd like to just real quick address you. You did cover a lot of ground as we previously discussed, but as a legislator, you know, my purpose is to stop legislation, write legislation. There's 4 branches in our government, and you mentioned the preamble. It's in this book, as well as the federal Constitution. But no matter what laws that we do, we're a country of laws. So one thing, there's a common denominator that your common sense makes sense about. Legislators can't legislate behavior. You know, whether a cigarette smoker takes that cigarette and throws it on the ground versus in the trash can that's right there, or guns, as you mentioned. Somebody has to get control of that gun and use it improperly in order to create that crime. We're really focused on really how we act and our behavior as people in civilized society. The legislature can't fix that. And I avoid that because I will concur that one of my preambles to doing any form of what I do in Olympia is I need to understand, is it constitutional or not? And that's the one thing the Constitution didn't really cover all that well, but the Pledge of Allegiance does, for example. One nation under God, individual, and we know this. That's what I seek that is hard for me to do as a senator, because I would like to, how would I write a law saying, you're going to act nice today? You're going to get along. You're going to be positive to society. You're going to do something good. You're not going to do bad behavior. And that's something that we're struggling with because we're dealing it down into that level. And I want you to know, sir, I agree with what you're saying, but I think that the common denominator there is just how we act as people. We know that it's wrong to point a gun at another human being unless your life or liberty for defending this country is at stake. Other than that, you don't have that right. So it's, to me, it's just really about behavior is the way I would do it.
Sir, you mentioned, when can we get back to common sense? You'll hear me saying that often, like, we should get back to common sense. What makes our job difficult is that people don't agree on what constitutes common sense. You spoke about 10 different issues-ish. If I asked you to give a proposal for each issue that you brought up, a proposal for a law, and then I said, folks in this room, we're going to vote on these things, you'd find you're in the minority on some of them. People don't agree with you. And some of the things you brought up, people do agree with you. And that's the way it works. And so when you see these legislatures that are 55-45 or 52-48, and they're very close. And then you see that there's an election and then it switches by a few votes one side. You see that there's these slight perturbations in the public's opinion about things. You can't just look at the public and say, folks, there's plastic in the ocean, we should ban it. And everyone goes, oh, good idea, let's do that. It isn't that simple. It just isn't, because we use plastic and everything. This is just one example that if we're going to have an actual practical proposal that's going to work, we have to have some kind of agreement about an underlying value or policy that we're trying to achieve, and then how we're going to do it in a way that's balanced and doesn't ruin people's lives. If I snap my fingers and said, you can't buy any more plastic this day going forward, I mean, what would we buy our loaves of bread in? What would we drive? How would we do anything that we do? And so these are just, I'm not necessarily looking for all the answers in this venue. I'm just saying that this is the difficulty of what being a legislator is that you're one of 150,000 people in our district, and everyone is passionate about their views and believes that their views are common sense. And why can't everyone see it my way? And it's just a thing about human nature that's just fascinating and interesting. And why can't you see things the way I see it? It's so simple for me. And he thinks the same thing vice versa. Why can't McIntyre see it the way I see it? And it's a difficult thing, but I have to take all that into account, that I'm representing 150,000 different points of view in the legislature. So but I won't denounce any of your points of view or what you said. I think you made some very good points, and others I think are worthy of discussion.
So if I may again, Mr. Chairman, just how you addressed it is bothersome to me. Because it presumes that you have the moral authority and the wisdom to outlaw plastic bags or something like that. I go back to what Senator Wilson said. We actually can have cause to take action on you if you improperly dispose of a plastic bag, like putting around somebody's head and suffocating them. That is not the function of the plastic bags. We cannot use that argument as why we ought to ban plastic bags. We need to look fundamentally at all the arguments as to what gives us the moral authority. And as long as we don't address it at that level, we're going to have constantly people asking for things my way. No, not his way, my way. And you'll never have a nation ever again. I mean, this country was founded on leave me alone.
Yeah, if I didn't make it clear, that's a big part of what I'm trying to say, is that it isn't so easy as flipping a switch. I'm just saying, oh, you want it banned? Okay, good. Can we get an aye vote on this? Let's ban it. It's not that easy. You really have to dig deep into the roots of philosophy in our Constitution and what we are actually allowed to do and not allowed to do. And sometimes I hate smoking. I wish everyone would quit, but I would never vote to say you can't. I cannot see myself ever doing that, even though I think it's a despicable habit. It's your right to do.
It's also, the remedy isn't always from the government. Olympia isn't here to save the day. So as individuals, if you want to take a position on this, then you have a lot of, well, power is a word. Then don't buy it. Don't support it. We always have an individual choice. And that is what I respect the most. That's I have to respect your common sense, but if we can't legislate everything in reality, I always defer back to you, whether it's called grassroots or individual rights, exercise them. And, so it's not that we're a country of laws that's to bind you as individuals. Absolutely not. I encourage you to express yourself and to live your life accordingly.
Well, then I suggest that Representative McIntyre and Senator Wilson, that you decide whether you have to leave today, tomorrow, or next week. Take some time, walk the downtown area, starting with First, all the way to Fifth, all the way to where it turns into Hazel, and just walk the streets and see. I'm not saying you shouldn't buy plastic. I'm saying there are ways to make it biodegradable and edible, where if you throw it on the ground, you don't throw it in the trash. There's a company in New Zealand that makes biodegradable plastic. So why can't we sit there and say, hey, you want to use plastic, make it biodegradable? Not say you can't recycle. And the recycling parts here in this county says we can't recycle the bottle caps. We can't recycle bottles with anything in it. Sure they can. It's called washing it out.
Okay, we're gonna move on to, we got other questions. It's a deep subject to you. I would suggest you contact them and work it out.
Hopefully this won't be that long. I'm Al Peffley. Most of you know me. I have a great concern because right now our nation is at war. It's at war from various incidents that have occurred, like COVID, like the tear down of the economy. And so while some of those things can't be revised now, hopefully we learn from the last events and what we're going through right now. The climate change hoax, the result of higher energy costs, the destruction of dams proposals, all of that is interrelated. What we have in our county here is an emergency management plan that is required by the state and is coming up to be revised this year. And we have a brand new emergency management director. What I'm proposing is that rather than just having the county involved in revising this, that we look realistically at the experiences we've already had with COVID, with the changes in the financial economy, and look at the, recovery with our state representatives, because even though you don't change the law, your voice is good for what, 150,000 people in multiple counties? And Southwest Washington is affected by the decisions made in this plan when things go south. If you're not paying attention with Seattle and Portland, we're right between them. I'm a prior PCO for this precinct. And I've had all kinds of interactions because of Seattle and Portland. We need to be prepared for the situations in this plan at a county and a state level. I'm very disappointed with the Department of Homeland Security. I'm sure I'm not the only one in this room. And it's going to be up to us. It's going to be up to us in the county when the first things happen. And it's going to be up to the state and the county to respond to it, because we got major Washington State Patrol office here and in the area that has to coordinate with our police departments and our fire department. I will work with Larry Hembry on the 25th. I have a meeting with him. We're going to discuss this plan and the infrastructure here. And I'm hoping that we can coordinate with the two of you. And I picked the two of you rather than just Jim, because you're still a port commissioner, right? Key assets, and you're involved with the military. Not that you're going to influence the military, but when it all goes south, the State National Guard and the Marines will be combined to bring law and order back. If we have attacks like you've seen in the last month, if you've been paying attention, I'll say the last 6 months, against major industrial facilities, train derailments, and other incidents that can cause major repercussions to this whole area, and primarily Cowlitz County, much more than Lewis or Skamania or Pacific. We have the threat areas, targets that can be used by people who are dissatisfied with what's going on in our society. And if you're not paying attention, BLM has raised its ugly head again, and so has Antifa in this area, especially in Portland. And Seattle is a disaster for their police smart department and response and all the things that are going on there. Eventually, it's going to come down I-5 or up I-5. And it has already. And if you don't think that the people in the Alabama camp aren't linked with Portland and Seattle, you don't understand what's going on. They have a king as a leader. So it's the human threats or incidents that I'm the most concerned about, that between the state and the county, we are going to respond accordingly, that those people don't have all the answers, the responders, but we talk together and have, I don't know, maybe once a year exercise together just to talk utilities, hospitals, police, fire, and state agencies. Who's connected to who and how we're going to respond together.
Yeah, Alan, you're on the topic of emergency planning.
Right.
And there's a number of emergencies. I mean, my heavens, look at the district. We live in a Cascadia area on the coast. We got this unpredictable volcano in the other corner. But I'll offer up to you is we are paying attention. You can't be alive nowadays and not see the importance of emergency planning. If you've read a newspaper, looked at the television or any form of information lately, look what just happened to our fellow Americans in Maui.
Right.
Here comes a massive disaster, and the emergency plan that the government has spent all this time on, that was another disaster. The disaster in Maui was compounded by the disaster or the failure in government in its emergency planning. We've all heard about the sirens and the lack of cutting the power.
Yeah.
Here's my point. You have a good point, Ellen. And as your state legislator, we do need to get an emergency plan that works and communicates and coordinates regardless what the emergency is. But I'm here to tell you, just look at recently, lessons learned. It didn't work very good. That piece of paper did not save. In fact, what we're talking about here, why I'm going to make it a relevant point, and I apologize to the commissioners, this isn't Cowlitz County, but there were over 100 American lives lost in Maui. That's the cost, is too much of loss of human life. So your point's well taken, you know, and as your legislator, I'll always be involved in that. And really what it comes down to is our form of ohana, which is family, of course, neighbor to neighbor, people to people, well before any plan comes. But the plan's important, Alan, and you're right. A lot of topics need to be covered.
Just for information, the LEPC, Local Emergency Planning the commission meets quarterly. I'm sure you can sit in on those anytime you want.
Well, the reason I brought up the state is the state has all of the equipment and expertise to respond to a biological attack. All the resources are at McCord, And,
So I'll repeat, the
and the
place to,
base.
the place to address that would be at one of the quarterly meetings of the LEPC. Hembry can tell you the time and the place.
Statewide
Yeah.
emergencies are declared, of course, on my level in
So-
Olympia.
so
The
I-
governor gets that, Alan, as you know. The governor declares all these emergencies. And as a legislator, that's something that we've tried to involve ourselves in. I mean, where have everybody been the past 2 years when I've co-sponsored those bills to have a voice in the emergency powers that a governor in this state has? It doesn't care whether the governor is a Republican or Democrat governor. We just lived through emergencies, dictation with the lowest form of law called mandates. Governor Inslee spewed out a ton of mandates. As legislators, we were cut out, sir, of that process. So what have I done as you're elected is I've co-sponsored bills that says, well, let's talk about it. Let's discuss this emergency because you're right, Alan. The state has a tremendous amount of resources that can save lives or be, ordered out. But as your senator, sir, my hands are tied and I don't think that's fair. I hear what you're saying and I'd like your voice to be heard, to be involved in the decision-making process of emergencies, which somewhat were excluded as legislators. So there's my problem back to you that I'd like to remedy.
Okay, well, my point is that you do represent us. So when we identify our needs, then you have voice in the legislature to contact an agency, like when the bridge went bad. You were very vocal on the Department of Transportation and what the plan was and what the remediation is. So I think that's the kind of relationship I'm talking about. I'm not talking about you changing the law for this, but to make this functional with state agencies and us here and make sure that the agencies know what our results were. So all I was suggesting was that I'd like to have a conversation with you and Larry and the board to make sure that all our I's are dotted and T's are crossed, but in a realistic manner about what's really going on in our nation right now, not just sandbags for flooding and an earthquake, which is an obvious problem, or a wildfire, that those things happen here too. But without this coordination about the human incidents, probability, I think it's much higher with all the intelligence that I'm seeing. The sarin bombs are gone from Umatilla. That's no longer a threat. But other disasters like that are sitting across the river in the casks of depleted rods from Trojan. So it's not just conspiracy theory. I know data. I hope that we are planning with Oregon and us to have this consolidated. And that happens at the state level, I'm assuming, rather than just the county.
Okay,
I'm done.
thank you. Yeah. Him and then.
All right. Just a minute. There we go. So I'm going to hold your feet to the fire now because I heard something here today that is disturbing me. And it's the fact that, well, we have 150,000 people that we have to listen to. And we hear all these voices, right? Now, really, in my mind, this is a democracy of what you're talking about, because you're going to you're eventually going to listen to all these voices. And you're going to get the one side and you're going to say, well, the majority says this. And that's really not what you're supposed to do. What you're supposed to do is what the Constitution says. I had this guy come to me one day years ago, wanted to put a yard sign in my yard. He's a good guy, liked him. I said, all right. And as he was leaving, he says, well, I'm trying to do what God tells me to do. And I took his sign right down. I don't care what your personal thoughts are. The fact is, you're supposed to do what the Constitution says. And if you're listening to a whole bunch of voices and you're going to go with the majority, well, then that's not a republic anymore. Then you're just, your jobs should be the easiest jobs in the world. I know they're not, but they should be, because what you should do, you should have your feet up on the desk and somebody comes in with something, you open your book, say, what's the Constitution say about that? And if it ain't in there, go. That's the republic, not the democracy.
So if you listened very closely, nowhere did I say I agree with the majority. I just said I talked to a lot of people.
Sure.
I
mean, that's what you got to say as a politician. I know that.
No, I've taken unpopular votes. I've made unpopular decisions that I know I'm in the minority in, but I felt right and I felt duty bound to principle to do it. The problem with saying, let's open up the Constitution and see what it says is the Constitution doesn't say how many hours a nurse practitioner should have in a clinical setting before she can be certified.
Exactly my
So
point.
what's the answer? How many hours should a nurse have before?
You know,
So I have to talk to people. I
yeah,
don't know.
I
I don't know
suppose
the
so,
answer.
but the
I don't-
fact is,
Don't open the Constitution and say, where does it say anything about? So I have to talk to
it
some
doesn't
nurses.
say anything
And
about
I-
it,
and I
right?
talked to some administrators and I talked to the educational institutions. I talked to people in the district. And then, yeah, there's no communist agenda in the policy. There's nothing in the Constitution says that we can't alter the hours of how many clinical hours of nurse practitioner training there is. So, and I have to make a decision. Most of the decisions that I have to make that are tough like that are not ones that are based on a constitutional principle. They're just things that ebb and flow with a policy as it stands. Now, when someone says we want to ban all guns, and I say, well, I can't abide that. That's directly opposed to the Constitution, among other policies that have come up. There's something, I don't care if it's 90 to 10, 99 to 1. If it's against the Constitution, I can't abide that. So that's my foundational principle. Then there's a whole litany of policies that come before us that aren't opposed to the Constitution. They're just policy proposals about shifting something. And I have to find out if the shift is right or not for the state, for the body of the whole. And it's not about doing what's constitutionally right or wrong. It's just about, is it make economic sense? And so I just wanted to say that. I don't, yeah, I'd love to be on the right side of every popular vote every single time, but it's just not the way it is.
Tim, you should know my position on this. I've said it twice so far today. I didn't say anything other than constitutional republic. And what Representative McIntyre just said, a lot of the legislation we do with doesn't really get into what you would say a specific amendment. But you know me, and you also know that I'm a member of a couple of caucuses. One of them is the Freedom Caucus. And there's 4 senators that we formed this caucus. And that's what we do. We look at everything and say, is this constitutional? It's kind of like a vetting process. The first step is, what does this do? Does it erode a right, protect or preserve a right? Then we get into auspice like privilege and things. But technically, I do this as a legislator. I look at this, every single foundation to every bill that I would want to vote for or against, amend, debate, compromise. I practice what I preach. That's why I'm a member of that Freedom Caucus. We look at it, is it even constitutional?
Well, that's good to know. And thank you, Joel, because you helped me make my point for me. You know, government's way too involved in our lives, and the less government is the best government. There's a certain lane government is supposed to be in, and government is way out of its lane in so many ways. And so thank you guys. I know it's a hard job you got, and it's fun to find something to give you a hard time about.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, it's one of the difficulties is we've been alloying the Constitution for 200 years. And we can't get there from here to a pure society, even though the technology would support that. The fact that it isn't in the Constitution typically is the indicator that you shouldn't do it. And the way I would deal with that is I push it to the lowest level in the land, which would be the municipalities, then the county. The state, it would be up there, but it'd take a while before it gets up to there. When it comes to legislating rules on hours and this and that, I can't imagine how you would have the audacity to put yourself in a position that says, I know how many hours somebody should work or shouldn't work, and nurses, how much training and what kind of training. That is just hubris of the maximum amount. Now, the things where I think we come in handy in is if the public says, we want a bridge here. Going back to, we definitely need another bridge across the Columbia here. That is something where I would ask the public, do you really want to pay for a bridge? It's your money. How do you want me to spend it on your behalf? Everything else is irrelevant constitutionally. I'm not going to tell you how to live or how many hours is. I'm not going to tell you which doctor is approved by me or the AMA or the bar. You want to talk about a lousy system? The bar, which reminds me, as long as I'm on a quick, on a tirade right now, how many people in the legislature have a JD or are members of the bar? Yeah, just roughly half, more,
Not half, probably I'd say a quarter.
a quarter?
Yeah, it's maybe a third.
Not as bad as I thought.
No, I thought the same thing, but then I started asking around and found out it wasn't as wicked a place as well, it's wicked,
Yeah,
but
okay, well, I mean,
Only one out of the 6 from our 2 districts, just Peter, yeah.
yeah, we've got a
Republican.
wonderful system where we tell the public, you don't like what we're doing, sue us. And of course, sue us, they've got to go to before a judge who's a member of the same club as the appellate court, which is a member of the same club as the Supreme Court. It's a stacked system. Anyhow, I'll stop there, of course, because I digress too much. My apologies.
I may be the only one that's gotten off course here, but I wanted to address specifically something with your committee's Representative McIntyre on education. I read an article this morning about 5 o'clock that said it was listing the various states and where they rated educationally for their average citizen. We've done a very good job. Washington is number 7 in that survey, which I obviously would hope would be higher, but number 7 is quite good. But recently I've been, for the last 2 years, I've been exposed to the Wahkiakum County robotics teams. And I'm curious if you have observed them or seen the success they've had, and what might be the possibility of looking at them as a role model and spreading it into a wider geographical area, i.e. across the state. I'm told there is a movement, perhaps in the city of Longview, to adopt a robotics club. And are you familiar with the club or have you seen them? I'm just curious what we can do to expand that and make things better.
yeah, before we hit the robotics, I promise I'll bring, do you remember in what regard we were in 7th place was it in graduation? Is it in?
It had to do with graduation, lower dropout rate, the number of advanced degrees that the citizens have had, the economy. There were some other factors too, but those are. the
Right. It
big-
sounds like all the things they're leaving out that where we actually lag horrendously behind in all the other. So it sounds like they took the best things, melded them together to get us a 7th place finish, which is about as good as you could possibly do manipulating data. So I'd be interested to see the article. I just know that we pay the most and we are at middle at best. Next door to Idaho, they blow us out of the water with their scores. They pay half for per kid's education than we do. So we're, in my opinion, we have a lot of work to do in education concerning the robotics. I'm familiar with it, being that the school is a golf swing away from my house in Cathlamet. So I'm familiar with the people that are active in the robotics program there, and I know about its successes, that they've gone to like a regional or district state finals.
Yes, I recently won an international competition in Maryland.
Mhm.
Last year, I think they placed 3rd or 4th, and this year they won the competition.
I know that it's picking up steam because I've seen we had an education day where students came to the Capitol. They set up robotics demonstrations about what their robots could do. And it was fascinating to see. So I definitely support it. I'm hesitant to get in the way of it, is what tends to happen is we say, oh, this is so great. We're going to mandate every school needs to have one. So then they need to hire a new person to do it part-time. And so good intentions. Yeah. Some things with good intentions can sometimes end up being less productive when we overdo it. So I'd love to support it in any small way that I could, because I love engineering, mathematics, and science. And I know that kind of stuff, that robotic stuff, is the way into the future. Learning to write in cursive. Sorry if anyone in here likes cursive. That's not anything to do with the future. That's reading your grandma's Christmas cards. Spending your time learning about robotics and computing and programming, that's the future. And so I'm eager to talk well about those things and even support them where I'm constitutionally allowed to.
The support of robotics, I'm a fan. I've had years of exposure to the local award-winning robotics group, let's call them. But the issue that you're talking about, it's great. I'm a legislator. And to me, when I hear what you're saying, I can say I support it, and I always will, but that sounds like curriculum stuff. That sounds like decisions that school boards should be empowering and making decisions on a local basis. That sounds like the Office of State Public Instruction. There's another branch of giant bureaucracy. You ever hear of them? Our K-12 group, Office of State Public Instruction. Why isn't that? These are great, and we will write letters of support. So this is how the system would work. We hear you. Thank you, sir. We support you. But how your legislators can do this is we can write those letters of support. Dear Mr. Chris Dahl, this is important, robotics. It plays a place in our economy, our future, and for kids to do. Why don't you take it on the state level and make it statewide for a public education system? Because our public education, like Representative McIntyre, we're not number 7 in a good way. I'll tell you what, with math scores, reading scores, and other scores, we're terrible. And I don't mean to say that to be hurtful, because it's repairable. But what I will say is we're also 40,000 students down on enrollment since the COVID. K-12's never recovered, and we're funded on a state constitutional basis. So there's a number of problems with K-12. It's a whole separate topic either, but you had me at robotics, and that's what I would say the way to do it, because those are great ideas, and I have no problems writing a letter to ask them to expand that on a statewide basis.
Thank you.
Well, I don't have a profound question, but I want to make a plug about a fair. I guess the Skamako Fair is Wahkiakum County or whatever. For $5, you can see the robotics, you can see FHA, FFA, all kinds of exhibits. I'm into the blues, and I asked the fellow there that they had a blues band. I says, does the drummer from Nirvana live here? Because I'd heard that before. Oh, no, he moved on, but the head of the Bee Gees is right up the corner, up the street. I says, my God. Rick, I have a request for you. I need to make a personal presentation and take about 2 minutes after you're done. I'll be gone next week. This will be a hard presentation for me to make.
Okay.
Wahkiakum County Fair, it's amazing. I attended that. Great place, Richard, in Skamakawa.
Okay. Well, we've gone about an hour and a half, and I want to say I appreciate your gentlemen's time. I hope it was worthwhile to the group out here. If you enjoyed that, let me know. I do have a request in on the federal side to try and get some people. I think it's good for us to interact so often. So Senator Wilson, thank you for coming by. Representative McIntyre, very, very much appreciate that. These guys are real open to you. You can contact me anytime. You've heard some real issues here. So we will close this portion and open up public comment, because I know you had something, and if you gentlemen don't have to sit here if you don't want to be part of that, but you're always welcome in our house.
You know, I gotta make sure to thank you guys, but not necessarily you as a board, but thank you for the people that took the time. Come on, it's in the morning. You took the time to show up. And for me, that always means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, no problem. Well, my comments do not have anything to do with the federal government or the state government. I like to direct it to the county. And it deals with the Nutter Corporation surface mine permit. My name is Robert Behringer. I live at 71 West Stock Road. And this surface mine is adjacent to mine, just north of mine, but adjacent to, separated by West Stock Road. I knew that the surface mine permit was ending, and I knew it was in August. I had dealt with it when they had reapplied, when another corporation reapplied for permit. I went to the building and planning, and I asked for a copy of the permit, and they could produce it or wouldn't produce it. I'm not sure which. And I questioned how they could enforce a permit if they didn't have ready access to that copy of that permit. So I'm not going to bore you with all the permit. There's 28 pages. And this was heard by the hearing commissioner, Mr. Scheidman. And I've highlighted some things that I would like to read about this. The hearing examiner on the 25th day of July, 2018.
Is the bright green light on? Some people are having trouble hearing.
Not yet.
Okay.
It
there
is
you go.
now.
Thank you.
Thank you. The hearing examiner heard the argument for a special use permit and for the Nutter Corporation to renew and expand the existing surface mine to remove up to 430,000 cubic yards of dredge spoils from a total of 60.81 acres. And the special use permit would allow for the removal of 430,000 cubic yards for over the next 5 years from the date of the hearing examiner decision. And again, that was in 2018. Then it says in condition 2 of the special use permit, it says the special use permit will not be extended beyond the approved 5 years unless exceptional circumstances are demonstrated. number 9 of this, it says the operator of the surface mine shall keep all roads clean and free of tracked and or spilled materials from the operation. Should material be tracked onto the county roadway, it shall be the responsibility of the operator of the surface mine operation to conduct the cleanup. In the event the county incurs cost of cleanup caused by the operator shall immediately reimburse the county for said costs as a condition of continued operation under the permit. And I'm gonna just make a comment on each one of these bullet points. Over the last 5 years of his operation, he has tracked rock onto the West Stock Road, even as far as up on the Pleasant Hill Road. I made no complaint against the Nutter Corporation in the 5 years that this was permitted. I did object to them getting a renewal in 2018. Number 12, no mining or reclamation activity shall occur within the shoreline management jurisdiction of the Cowlitz River unless such activity is permitted in accordance with the Cowlitz County Shoreline Master Program, which require review under a separate permit. Now, this isn't the important part of this. Signs identifying the boundary to the 200-foot shoreline buffer acceptable to county staff shall be installed every 50 feet along the buffer. The signs shall be of sufficient size as to be legible and shall warn that no mining activity or other activity shall occur within the buffer. The signs shall be maintained in good repair until mining and reclamation operations have ceased. There was no signs placed. They drove steel fence posts. That's another violation. Number 14, watering. Watering the area during dry weather to control dust. An on-site well, which they have, will be connected to a sprinkler line along the haul road to control dust. The sprinkler system has been out of order. The operator also will use additional watering truck as necessary during dry weather. Now, this last July and August, as the weather was dry and we had no rain, the dust was getting pretty severe. In fact, our neighbors to the north of the mine complained all the time because the wind had basically came from the south and blew the dust to the north. So it didn't affect me as bad. And when it did, I called one of the superintendents for Nutter Corporation and they responded by sending a water truck. Number 20 of these bullet points, this is a very important one to me. Annual documentation shall be submitted to the Department of Building and Planning that show excavation complies with the permitted conditions. Documentation may consist of aerial photographs or survey data showing the present and permitted mining limits, or the survey data sealed by a registered land surveyor showing pit depth, pit side slopes for the reclaimed area. I'd like to see that data. I don't think it was the county ever enforced it. And if they did, then I'd like to see it. Access, number 21, access to the site shall be limited to a maximum of 60 truck trips per day. When we went through the hearing, it was 30 loads. So he has to come and he has to go. So that's 30 truckloads. They have exceeded that on numerous occasions. Number 26, the applicant must control invasive species, especially Scotch broom. They have not. They've made an attempt, but they have not. A copy, number 27, a copy of the permit conditions shall be made available to all truck drivers, equipment operators, and employees of the applicant and third parties engaged in any on-site activities. I would say they did not comply. They've had what we call JIPO truck drivers in there at many times where I'm certain that all these permits were not readily available to them in the truck. This was a condition now that was placed by Mr. Scheibmeyer on the conditions of approving their permit. Number 28, any dispute as to any condition of the applicant's obligation to meet it including any allegations of non-performance and whether the permit should be canceled, shall be received by the hearing examiner dated this third day of August, 2018. So that's when the permit had expired, okay? And I will add that the Nutter Corporation continued to mine the whole month of August. So it was past the date of their permit. I wasn't gonna let that happen because the prior permit that ran from 2013 to 2018, no, I beg your pardon, from 2007 to 2012, they continued to mine until 2017 without a permit. That was a pretty egregious issue with the permit. Now, he talks about the background, and this is also pretty interesting. The Nutter Corporation applied for a new special use permit to resume surface mine operations in 2007. Case number 0720.20.1. On June 19th, the hearing examiner pro tem, this was not Mr. Scheibmeier, granted the applicant its requested 5-year special use permit subject to a number of conditions. That permit expired in 2012, was not renewed. Information provided by adjoining landowners demonstrates significant and continuous violations of the terms of the 2007 permit. Among other things, during wet weather, the applicant's operation tracked large amounts of mud onto public roads and highways, while in dry weather, the applicant failed to properly maintain dust control. The applicant also failed to properly maintain invasive plants such as Scotch broom, leading ultimately to the burning of the Scotch broom, which in turn led to large smoke problems. In general, the 2007 through 2012 permit proved to be trying to the surrounding property owners. The applicant did not seek to renew the 2007 permit when it expired in 2012. Nonetheless, there is clear evidence the applicant continued to maintain surface mining operations despite the lack of a permit. These unpermitted operations perpetuated the earlier problems with mud, dust, etc. In addition, the applicant allowed BNSF to use the site as a staging area for rail line repairs in an unpermitted industrial use. The unpermitted staging operations resulted in even more problems, including the use of heavy equipment and lighting throughout the night. The county's own records reflect a host of complaints by neighboring property owners and county staff's own frustration with getting the applicant to respond. The other noteworthy, and I'm skipping a part here, the other noteworthy modification to earlier mining request in the applicant seeks a special use permit for 20 years, not the standard 5 years. Perhaps because of past permit violations, the review of the current application took longer than normal. Environmental review was completed in early 2017 and led to the county's issuance of a determination of non-significance on February 23rd, 2017. Numerous comments were received from agencies and the public. These comments did not alter the county's decision to issue DNS, but did result in a number of additional conditions for project approval. After further refinement, the application was rescheduled for public hearing on July 25th, 2018. Notice of the rescheduled public hearing renewed other public opposition, resulting in additional written comments in opposition to the project. Members of the public continue to note many past violations by the applicant and question why its continuous misconduct should be rewarded through a new permit. Now, I got some more bullet points here. This dealt with the prior.
I think.
I'm almost, well,
Well,
okay.
I think what you're saying is they shouldn't be operating because their permit is expired. I think that's.
It is. However, I just talked to Tracy, the manager of the building and planning, and they sent a letter to cease and desist, which they have. my point is coming up here, if I may.
Okay,
So the county, after all these violations, and I had documented a 3-ring binder that I presented to the county and to the hearing examiner of all the pictures and violations. And the county still went ahead and recommended approval after mining for 5 years without a permit in light of all these violations that they had occurred. So the county, this is from the hearing examiner, the county's enforcement of the previous permit, as well as its enforcement of other code violations, has been virtually non-existent and has enabled the applicant to engage in significant misconduct. The applicant has been allowed to dump or store unrelated material on site, including Vector waste, which the county acknowledges is a highly regulated waste material. There's widespread concern that, as in the past, the applicant will track mud onto West Stock Road and the county highway, and similarly concern about the chronic dust problems. The applicant has a record of continuous violations of the earlier permit, which do not justify the issuance of a new permit. The proposed 20-year permit term for the permit is far too long, and at a maximum allowed time should be 5 years. Now, it's interesting, he mentions this 3 or 4 times, that it would be non-renewable. For 5 years, non-renewable. Under the prior permit, the applicant was not to use the private road located north of the site, yet he repeatedly did so whenever access to West Stock Road was impeded by flooding on the road. And he had done that, and that's a private road. There's no reason to use that road. The applicant's internal road system is constructed of reject rock, and this is what the hearing examiner, which produced mud and dust. The applicant's truck washing system was inadequate, and it still is. The sprinkler system to water the roads has been broken. And I know that for a fact because the superintendent for Nutter has told me. They've allowed some of this is redundant, and this is not my words, this is the hearing examiner. The Scotch broom has been allowed to grow. The use of BNSF to use the adjoining property next to Nutter's. So there's been, and plus West Stock Road, you may or may not know, but it's a very narrow road. It's an oiled and graveled road. It's not meant basically for heavy truck traffic, which the county had to repair and at the entrance of Pleasant Hill because the road was so fractured that they had to come in and repave it. The applicant's prior use has been a source of constant aggravation to the neighborhood for more than a decade. The applicant has had decades to remove the dredge spoils and yet has only removed a small portion despite 3 prior 5-year special use permits. And the applicant is demonstrating little attempt to remove this material in a timely way. The applicant's request to be allowed 60 truck trips is excessive. And again, copies should be placed in every truck that comes onto the site, which I know that hasn't happened. So here's his analysis, okay? On the other hand, evidence amply demonstrates that the applicant did not comply with the terms of its last permit, continued operations after the permit expired, used the project site for unpermitted activity, and for the past 10 years, the applicant's conduct, at best, has been unimpressive, and at worst, has been openly hostile to governmental regulations. Further, the applicant displays no remorse or repentance for this misconduct. There's no basis
Mr.
for any
Chairman?
competence.
Is it time to break this? I mean, no remorse. I don't know what we're doing with this.
Where I'm going is,
I know where you're going.
well,
but-
the point is this, Mr. Mortensen, that when I talked to Trevin Bradley at the Building and Planning, after I got a copy of this, he'd called me and he said, well, that they're gonna have to reapply for a new permit. Well, the hearing, what I'm going through is they've demonstrated poorly that they didn't apply or that they didn't adhere to the tenant.
Can you sum what you would like in a sentence or two?
I'd like them not to renew not even be able to renew the permit.
Okay, let's go from there.
Okay.
They've demonstrated,
Hey, you've made that point
Okay.
several times over. You're exhausting us with your
well,
repetitiveness.
I want you to hear what, this isn't my words. This is.
It
what they-
doesn't matter at this
Okay.
point. You're exhausting us with repeating the same thing, and in a normal, in a court of law, that would just be something you'd submit and you wouldn't go through it in this way, or you'd call it hearsay.
It exhausted us too, and we came asking for your help after the violation of 5 years of going past this permit, and when we went to go find out when their permit was up, nobody even knew it here. So how could they even be checking their permit and checking any of the stipulations that they had for that permit when they didn't even have a copy of their permit? Yeah, it's frustrating. He's reading you the permit because obviously you folks didn't have the permit. They had to go and get it.
Yeah, Trevin Bradley got me a copy of the permit from the hearing examiner. Because I had talked to Jason Lugo in the Building and Planning, and he couldn't find the permit.
And he said that they were gonna offer another permit to him. No, this is enough.
This was. And this was.
Fix the fractured road and
Okay.
let's get
Hey,
it.
where are we at on the permit right now? It's expired. That's what I want to know.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Yeah.
Tracy Jackson, Building and Planning Director. We were made aware of this last week from a complaint that we pulled the file with Mr. Berenger has, and we are aware that the permit has expired. I personally notified and called Nutter Corporation on Thursday. We did a cease and desist letter. It went out Thursday in the mail. It'll go through our nuisance abatement officer, Trevin, through the process. However, currently the county has interim surface mine control, an interim surface mine control moratorium. So we'll be working with our legal department if Nutter does come back and reapply or ask to be reapplied for a new permit. But for right now, it's expired and we've asked them to cease and desist.
So until such point they come back to apply, they're supposed to not do any
Correct.
operations.
And
here.
they, and,
No,
and-
no more trucks, no more anything.
correct. No more.
And if they don't stop, then where do we go from there?
Then we'll work with our legal department with our nuisance abatement to stop the work that if and when it would happen.
So I know there's a committee working on a rewrite of the surface mining
The surface
permits.
mine, the interim controls, we have a draft ordinance there and it's over with our legal department right now.
Can they apply under the interim controls, or is that part of the control? Is
That would be
no
through,
new,
we would have to work with Doug and David over there. Yes, at this point. So right now, there's nothing that can happen. They don't have a permit anyway, so it's expired. So right now, we have nothing in hand to even discuss, other than we have asked them to cease and desist. I apologize if you guys have been through this. We're doing what we can on our end, but and Mr. Berenger did just confirm that they have not been hauling this weekend. So
That's correct.
he has honored it for at least from my phone call from Thursday.
Does this appear ultimately before the planning commission?
It would go back to the hearing examiner, if the interim controls were removed.
Right, but at some point, I assume that the Nutter Corporation will want to apply at some point.
Surface mines go through hearing
Yeah,
examiner.
and
Yes.
does that have to go through the planning commission?
No, it's just hearing examiner.
Just the SUP.
Correct.
they're going to be reviewing the recommended new versions, right?
That's correct.
And that's
That's all part of,
within
that's
a
a separate process, but
Yeah,
now they're
right.
gonna be parallel.
But until the new programs come through, they're not gonna even be able to apply, are they?
Well, that's the question, yeah.
Well, I'd have to work with Doug in our legal department.
My understanding was that the current controls apply.
Correct.
Okay.
And we don't have an application in front of us. We didn't know if there was one gonna be coming in the door either.
Right, so,
yeah.
so your question was, can tomorrow the Nutter Corporation say, I want to apply? And I think the answer is yes. But they have to comply with the new rules,
Correct.
right?
Well, first of all, I served on that citizen committee to help
Right.
rewrite the
Remember,
the surface mine conditions and the codes in this county. What my point is if the hearing examiner, which is hired by the county, I assume he's paid for his services. If the county can override what his decision is, then why are we paying a hearing examiner to hear this case? He states clearly in the conditions, the special use permit will not be extended beyond the approved 5 years unless exceptional circumstances are demonstrated. And that's my point. It should be a non-issue. If he applies, sorry, the hearing examiner said no.
We're not a penalizing institution here. I know a lot of ugliness came out through the past. We cannot turn the clock back. We cannot fix
I'm not
that.
asking that.
We cannot fix that. What I want to do today going forward is make sure that we issue a permit if it is within the legal bounds of our requirements and move forward from there. There is a new, whatever this, the special use permit fellow, said before, to me, doesn't mean anything. The new application is what should take hold. And the special use, what's the name of the guy? Not the person.
Schreibmeyer,
Yeah, but not the person, the
hearings examiner.
hearings examiner. Thank you. Let the hearing examiner answer that. If he wants to take into account past history, I don't know. I mean, that'll be up to him.
Well, and
Why don't we just tell the Nutter Corporation they're no longer to do any business at all, any place in the world, because they have forfeited their life.
I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is if it comes before the county and he reapplies for a permit, the hearing examiner ruled that 5 years only, unless there's exceptional. So when he applies for a permit, the county should say the permit, we won't accept your.
It doesn't work that way. At the end of 5 years, they get to throw their hat in the ring again. What's unusual about that? That's irrelevant. And if you wish to speak, come up to the microphone.
This permit that they issued for them to get for 5 years, I'm gonna just go and tell everybody here in Cowlitz County, we don't need a permit. Because our county doesn't even have a copy of a permit. And everything that he just said here and gave you bullet points of all the things that this permit was supposed to adhere to, he didn't adhere to one thing in 5 years. And for 5 years, we never said one word. And if he would have quit at the end of 5 years, we wouldn't be here. But he ran for another month and he would not have stopped unless all the neighbors kept calling and complaining. And we wanted to get a copy of the permit and the county didn't even have it. I don't understand this.
So that's my point. He's demonstrated really hostile to this county. And we're going to entertain the idea of him reapplying for a permit. That's where I have an issue with. And I don't understand how you could even entertain that. when the hearing examiner ruled that it would not go beyond 5 years.
I do believe you that you don't understand.
Well, maybe so.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. I remember when you came before us before.
Yes.
And you served on that committee and made the input and the conditions came out. The assumption was there would be some kind of enforcement and oversight. And that didn't happen. To be sure, I think there aren't very many of the names that you suggested that still work for the department. There's been a turnover in staff, and unfortunately, sometimes when staff leave, have been working on it, the ball gets dropped. And it sounds like, at least it sounds like that to me, may have happened in your case. We're going to continue expressing an interest in how this is going to be resolved. And we have a new director in that department now, I think maybe the third one since that original permit was done. So she's going to be communicating with us, I'm sure, on these next steps. That old permit is pretty damning, as you've pointed out. That's going to be a factor. And yeah, we're also revising it. So the law, there's some vesting maybe that might be involved that we don't have any control over. That's why she said we're consulting with the lawyers to find out the next steps.
Right.
You brought it to our attention, and thank you, because we need to get these kinds of things resolved. What good are permits if we don't have an enforcement system? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, don't misunderstand my statement. Also, what their behavior was is despicable as you've described it. So this is not defending them in any way. In fact, I have a lament that very often we get complaints, and there's nothing we can really do about it. If we were to have pursued the chairman's question of what happens next, let's say you call us up and you say, at this point in time, we saw this truck driving out of there with a load of material. What's the next step?
They'd call our, excuse me, they'd call our office, or you'd call our office, and we would have Trevin go out and take a look and investigate.
And then what happens? Let's say you find out it was a violation, then what happens?
We would get a hold of the company by letter and phone call and ask them to see, just like we did on Thursday, ask them to cease and desist.
So how many cease and desist do we issue? I mean, can they continue the business going from
No,
week after week? How
We
do we
work with-
stop them?
we work with our prosecuting attorney's office and we work on a way to shut them down.
So you're
Yeah, we
looking
do have,
there,
it is some time. It does take time. Everything unfortunately takes time, but it's a process and we're working on it.
So you said that you can't penalize for things in the past. This was a permit that was issued, and I think the county was remiss in checking up on it. And this is certainly prior to your coming
Sure.
on the scene. But the signs weren't placed. There was no data that was recorded with the county. That's all part of this permit. So what do we do about that? We just say, oh, well, it already happened. We can't do anything about it. That's not responsible government. Is that to you? Is that responsible?
I probably agree with you. There should be some penalties involved, if nothing more, but I'm saying there's nothing in our toolbox here that allows us to do anything.
Well, I think there is, because why would they hire a nuisance abatement officer if there wasn't a way to levy a fine against somebody that didn't? I think that's Trevin Bradley's role, is it not? Code enforcement, whatever you want to call it. You know, it's.
That's
like-
that's for today going forward. I can't go and fine you for having parked illegally someplace, even though I have a picture of it and it was last year. I mean, that'll never work.
You know, we have road signs on the freeway that says their speed limit's 70 miles an hour, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's cars that'll go 140 miles an hour. And there's cars that'll go 40 miles an hour. And if they all got on the freeway and drove however slow or however fast they wanted, the only reason that they obey the sign is because they know that there may be a cop around the corner that could to enforce that speed. If there's no enforcement of permits, then this is counties wide open. If we can't enforce the things that are egregiously wrong,
Have you ever seen the shoplifting that goes on in town now?
that's a separate issue.
It's the same thing.
No, but the county doesn't enforce things like that for private.
We
Yeah,
go to the
okay.
same, to
But
to
this
the
is a
same
county-
Superior Court.
County permit. Okay, are you done with me? Is that?
We will continue
for me.
monitoring. We're gonna get reports.
Yeah.
I think that's fair to say.
Okay,
So thank you again for bringing it to our attention.
well, thanks for
I
hearing
didn't
me.
know. I didn't.
Thank you. Been very frustrating.
Okay. Any other citizen comments?
I want to say, I feel for these guys because where I live, they load rail cars and they have no dust control at all. And I just know from like working in different industries, even out in the woods, Warehouser waters the roads, so they don't raise up a bunch of dust. So I hope you guys get some resolution out of this because I know across the street from me, it's the railroad and nobody's going to stand up to them. So if you get something out of it, man, lucky, I hope you do.
This presentation comes hard. I have a close affinity to Arn, and he'll understand why after I begin. My name is Richard Dreyer. I live at 2235 34th Avenue, Longview, Washington. I am 80 years old and I am a widower. I am a member of the Oneida Nation. I am a half-breed. My mother was an Indian princess. I am a Democratic politician. I have been Democratic Person of the Year. I have been Labor Person of the Year. I consider Teresa Purcell a close friend. I consider Arn Martinson a close friend. I am friends with Jeff Wilson, who is our senator. I am friends with Judge Gary Basher, who was the head of the original drug court. I am a recovering addict. When we say the word addict, we think of drugs. My addiction is to alcohol. Arn and I have a mutual friend who beat a cocaine habit. His ex-wife beat a cocaine habit. And though he wouldn't tell me, I'm pretty sure that his daughter just graduated from drug court. When we talk about drugs for the rich, we talk about pot and cocaine. When we talk about drugs for the poor, we talk about everything. I have a 52-year-old, she doesn't consider me a boyfriend, but she likes to spend time with me. She is a visiting nurse, and she goes into the Highlands and South Kelso, and she says at times she fears for her life. She says addiction is rampant, and she says fentanyl is rampant. We had Judge Basher to our meeting. We've had both of you to our retirees group. Judge Basher talked about alcoholism, and Rick Von Rock knew at that time that I was an alcoholic. And Judge Basher came back with tears in his eyes, and he says, I met one of my people in drug court, and he told the judge, he says, Judge, I've been clean one day, and tomorrow is another day. I have a friend named Mary. Mary, when I was a caseworker, I used counseling. I was not a psychotherapist. I was not what you would call a counselor. I have a friend named Mary and Mary was exhibiting psychotic behavior. And I thought, what the hell? I'm way over my head. So I talked to my sister-in-law, who is also an alcoholic. And I says, has Mary talked to you? She says, yes, she's talked about her psychotic behavior. I says, does she have a therapist? And she says, yes, she is a counselor and she does drug intervention. Mary is exhibiting behavior that I can't tell. I know that she was raped, but I don't know when or whatever. That's way above my pay grade. She has met with a drug specialist as far as rapes. There is definitely a rape kit, and she is getting help. If you want to ask me about her prognosis, I think her prognosis is excellent. She has a support group. She has 2 women's groups, and she is a success. I have another friend who I am still counseling. My daughter talked to me about her, and she said she has a character disorder. And that, if you know anything about psychology, that's a difficult category to treat. I'm still with her because she needs psychotherapy. She needs to build a trust with a psychotherapist. She had been to that stage and the psychotherapist moved. She wants to have a relationship with me one-on-one, and it's innocent enough, but she is very intelligent. She's a very personable person. She is highly suicidal. She has a friend whom is probably between the 2 of us, her 2 good friends. And she told me the other day, she says, well, we can give a baby shower for your daughter. Now, it is my hope that Mary gets to be with my friend, and through their association will help her out. Drugs is the dirty business. I have been in Alcoholics Anonymous for 6 years. I fell off the wagon 3 years ago, and I fell off the wagon just this time because I couldn't deal with Mary's psychotic behavior. I appreciate you listening to me, and I thank God that I didn't have to wait until next week to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I see we've kind of emptied out, so I don't see any hands raised. I don't see any others. We'll be back at 1:30, but we'll adjourn this meeting here. Thank you.
Hi, this is Kelly Dombrowski, the clerk of the board. I am doing a bid opening for asphalt replacement. We received 3 bids. I'm opening the first bid right now. This bid is for Advanced Excavating Specialists as LLC. And the grand total for all locations is $600,618.20. Open the next sealed bid. This bid is from Midway Underground LLC. And grand total for all locations is $993,276. And the last sealed bid this bid is from Lakeside Industries Incorporated. Grand total for all locations is $486,542.94. These bids will be submitted to the Public Works Department for sufficiency and responsiveness. Thank you.